Chapter 710. Marriage. In Xingjing sect's encampment in Immortal 4 area, Hichu Daoran stared at the document presented by Wang Lu in astonishment and blurted out. With Daoist Hitu's vision and temperament, there were not many things in this world that could shock him. However, at this time, he was so shocked by the appalling title on the document in front of him that he opened his mouth wide. The teacup in his hand shook uncontrollably, spilling clear tea. Hichu Daoran's reaction also shocked the people around him. The two young Daoist children with delicate features widened their eyes in surprise. They had been serving Hichu Daoran for more than 100 years, and such a situation was really rare. They were very curious about what kind of document could make their supreme lose his composure like this. However, at this time, they suppressed the curiosity in their hearts and ignored it. Because their duty was to listen to Hichu Daoran's orders, not to inquire about the news that they shouldn't inquire about. In fact, although Hichu Daoran's character was simple and rigid, he was not a very harsh sect leader. In front of him, occasionally overstepping his boundaries, he would not care. However, at this time, in addition to Hichu and the two Daoist children, there was also a strict big sister of the sect. Qianghua. Master, please pay attention to your manners. The girl with a flawless face frowned slightly and mercilessly pointed out Hichu Daoran's improper behavior. However, in Hichu's apology, she turned her eyes to the document in his hand. As the lead disciple of Xingjing's sect, she had the same authority as a senior elder. She was qualified to read the document in Hichu's hand directly. As her eyes swept through the document, Qianghua gently read out the title. Request for instructions on the marriage between Supreme Hichu and the leader of the Dixian, Tetragon. When she read the last few words, Qianghua's tone could not help but rise, because the matter was too incredible. Even if it was just such a title, it made people want to immediately rush to the Immortal 5 area, drag out Wang Lu, and ask him what kind of trick he was playing. After Qianghua read out the title, the two Taoist children standing at the side of the house tacitly left. There were some words that they shouldn't have heard. Even if they were to poke their ears, they still shouldn't listen. A moment later, Qianghua raised her head and said, "Master, please allow me to read this document with you." He too nodded. Not long after, the two of them finished reading the document and fell into deep thought at the same time. Although the title could be described as horrifying and absurd, Wang Lu's statement of facts in this document was rigorous and serious. He wrote down all the things that happened during his meeting with Senior Gem Emperor and this request for instructions, and then put forward his own suggestions. Tetragon intended to suspend the grand competition and proposed an alternative that was difficult to oppose. In order to show her sincerity, she was willing to have a political marriage with the Wanxian League, and the most representative figure of the Wanxian League was Hichu Daoran, the number one person in 9 regions. As it happened, Hichu Daoran had never been married, so he and Tetragon were simply a match made in heaven. Although Tetragon is a woman, her character is more upright than that of a man. She does things cleanly and neatly, and she means what she says, which is in line with Supreme Hitu's style of doing things. In addition, although she is an ancient figure, her appearance is like that of a young girl. Her face is delicate and dignified, and her figure is young but slightly graceful. To sum up, it is recommended that Supreme Hitu agree to the other party's marriage request and become Daoist companions with Tetragon. Is it okay? After reading the whole report, Hichu Daoran was silent. Qianghua sighed softly and said, "The change of things is really unexpected." Unexpectedly, there is a character like Tetragon on the side of Dixian. Unfortunately. Master, how should we reply to Wang Lu? Hichu Daoran pondered and said, "Call him first." After being summoned by Hitu, Wang Lu appeared in front of him a moment later. "Greetings, Supreme Tuesday." After a casual salute, Wang Lu asked with a smile, "Supreme must have read my request. What do you think? Is Tetragon's peerless girl in line with your taste? Or do you prefer a little more mature?" Qianghua shouted, "Don't talk nonsense." Hichu Daoran didn't mind Wang Lu's teasing and said, "The reason I called you here is indeed about Tetragon. This person suddenly rose from his sleep and surprised us with a single brilliant feat. However, you mentioned in your report that after meeting you, she proposed to end the grand competition. As an alternative, on the one hand, she will fight the Wanxian League alone in the arena for a month. On the other hand, she is ready to marry a member of the Wanxian League. Your report directly asks for the marriage. Does it mean that you have agreed to end the grand competition? Wang Lu's countenance turned serious. Supreme is right. In my opinion, the grand competition can indeed end. Qianghua asked in a deep voice, in this grand competition, we have worked hard to gradually reverse the situation from a desperate situation. Now we are in an advantageous position. Why should we give up halfway because of the other party's words? Do you think she is so powerful that it is irresistible, or do you think her proposal will be more beneficial to us? Wang Lu said, actually, it has nothing to do with Tetragon's alternative plan. I agree with her plan. The most important thing is that there is no value in continuing the grand competition. After a pause, Wang Lu explained, my original intention in designing the grand competition was not just to win the competition. I hope that through this competition, I can promote the internal exchange of the Wanxian League, and at the same time, narrow the distance between the Wanxian League and the Dixian League. In this way, no matter who wins or loses in the future, at least we can unite as a whole as possible. Only in this way can we hope to compete against more powerful opponents. However, the grand competition has continued to this day, and the effect is not ideal. Not only has the distance with the Dixian League not been narrowed, but it has also brewed hatred because of the killing between them. At the same time, the Wanxian League has barely shown cohesion under high pressure, and the internal contradictions have not decreased but increased. From this point of view, I have failed in my duty as the chief planner. After listening to Wang Lu's words, Hichu Daoran was silent for a long time. This is not your fault. Before he could finish his words, he saw Wang Lu nod and say, Supreme is wise, this is indeed not my fault. Hichu Daoran suddenly felt as if he was choked and could not speak for a long time. Wang Lu explained, at the beginning of the grand competition, the Dixian League has already made a storm of blood. Even if I have thousands of means, I can't do anything about it. Cooperation requires a tacit understanding between the two sides. If they don't cooperate, our unilateral force will only cause friction and bleeding. Later, I plan to retaliate and kill people, which was already the last resort. If I can't maintain unity with the Dixian League, I should at least unite with my own people and not let my own people lose confidence. However, looking back on our original intention, the grand competition is really tantamount to chicken ribs. The hands of both sides are stained with each other's blood. Even if we win the competition in the end, what's the point of Dixian League not being convinced? To what extent can a single contract restrain the Dixian League? Daoist He too let out a sigh and remained silent. As a matter of fact, the high-level elders had long been aware of the situation that Wang Lu said. From the beginning of the competition, when the Dixian League made a ruthless move, they realized that this grand competition was doomed to be unable to end well. In the competition, Hichu Daoran vigorously delegated power to Wang Lu, who was still inexperienced and had shallow cultivation base, to control the overall situation. This was more or less the reason. If something was doomed to fail, then let Wang Lu toss it around. Maybe there could be a miracle. Of course, it's not that there is no room for maneuver. My previous consideration was to pull one side and fight another side. On the one hand, would use Xian Mo as a channel to gradually establish friendship with the more moderate Dixian League. On the other hand, would cut off the ruthless people like Shuoro Tu and Little Poison Immortal. Although the implementation will be very troublesome and the effect may not be good, it's the only way. Wang Lu said in a deep voice, but now the situation has changed. Xian Mo and the others have been exiled by Tetragon. We have lost the channel to establish personal friendship with Dixian League. The original plan is no longer feasible. The value of the grand competition has been further reduced. However, the appearance of Tetragon has given me a turning point. According to the original plan, because the Dixian League is like scattered sand, we should try our best to make friends with everyone in the Dixian League. But now that Tetragon has unified the League, we only need to make friends with her alone. As for how to unite the Dixian League, that is the task of Tetragon. Originally, we needed to defeat more than 100 Dixian League members in thousands of intricate events. During this period, we need to consume a lot of resources, which has also led to a lot of internal contradictions. But now, we only need to focus on Tetragon alone. In 1 month, we can compete with her in any event, and in thousands of events, as long as we can win one. Hearing this, he too interrupted. If she dares to make such a condition, she must have something to rely on. According to what you said in your report, Tetragon's strength and calculation are unprecedentedly powerful, almost omniscient and omnipotent. So, how can you guarantee that we can absolutely win a match in 1 month? Wang Lu said, it doesn't matter if we can't win. If Tetragon is really strong enough to sweep the Wuxia League, what else can we do but accept the loss? It would be too ugly to admit defeat. Moreover, the marriage proposed by Tetragon is precisely prepared for this situation. We can't overwhelm her on the battlefield, so we can only hope that the person who marries her can do her duty. Speaking of this, Wang Lu turned his eyes to the document in He Tu's hand. Supreme He Tu, you are the well-deserved #1 person in the Wuxia League. You are extremely strong and highly respected. No one can shoulder this heavy responsibility except you. Speaking of this, even Xianghua felt speechless. And He Chu Daoran pondered for a long time, his expression changed 3 times. Finally, after thinking for a long time, He Chu Daoran gave his answer. This matter. I'm afraid I can only say sorry. Wang Lu was surprised. Why? Because I practiced the virgin skill. Chapter 7:11. In He Chu Daoran's tower, the long silence made the atmosphere somewhat austere. In the huge room, there were only He Tu, Xianghua, and Wang Lu, 3 people. All of them were expressionless, as if they were petrified. When the river of time flowed, it seemed to bypass these 3 people, making them independent of the time and space. After no one knows how much time has passed, Wang Lu coughed and broke the silence. I'm sorry, could I trouble you to repeat it again? I think I heard it wrong just now. He Chu Daoran very seriously repeated, I practiced the virgin skill. Wang Lu tightly pursed his lips and stared at the old man in front of him. After a long time, he somewhat tremblingly asked, Virgin skill, don't you think it's a waste? He Chu Daoran blinked his eyes. What waste? Wang Lu said, the body, hair, and skin are given by your parents. Don't you think it's a pity to abandon such a big device? He Chu Daoran said, I've been using it, how could I abandon it? If it doesn't provide the innate yang energy, how could I practice the virgin skill? Wang Lu was right, the virgin skill was not castration, there was indeed a difference between the two. However, he still felt that it was a waste. The dignified sect leader of Xingjing sect, the leader of the hundreds of millions of cultivators in 9 regions, the peerless master that countless girls didn't even dare to dream of, actually practiced the virgin skill. No wonder Shizhou Jin was always indifferent to Xingjing sect, especially to He Chu Daoran. This was simply a reckless waste of God's good gift. However, Wang Lu only thought about it in his heart. There were countless cultivators in 9 regions who practiced the virgin skill, and He Chu Daoran was not a maverick. It seemed that the sect leader of Lingjian school didn't make full use of his device. Wang Lu was unhappy because if He Chu Daoran cultivated the virgin technique, it would be much more troublesome to persuade him to marry Tetragon. It's like this. Tetragon said that the marriage is just a facade. She won't have sex with anyone, so you don't have to worry that the marriage will break your virginity. You can rest assured and marry her. Xianghua looked angry and scolded, Wang Lu, what do you think a supreme is? Wang Lu sincerely said, of course, he is the role model of 9 regions, the leader of hundreds of millions of cultivators, the well-deserved first in this world. Therefore, only He Chu Daoran is qualified to marry Tetragon. If it were anyone else, it would be absolutely impossible. Supreme has always been broad-minded about the 9 regions, so presumably, you can't bear to hinder the alliance with the Dixian because of your own selfishness, which is a major event related to the rise and fall of the 9 regions. Upon hearing this, He Chu too was stunned. That seems to be Qianghua angrily interrupted Hichu Daoran and angrily said to Wang Lu, "A gentleman can be deceived by his own means, but you're not polite at all. What you said is high-sounding, but I think you're just trying to divert the trouble to someone else. Since Tetragon wants to marry, why didn't she look for my master directly, but you first? Doesn't she know who the current leader of the Wanxian League is? She looked for you first, which can only mean that in her opinion, you are more suitable." Wang Lu inwardly said, "She is indeed worthy to be the lead disciple of Xingjing's sect. Her deduction is really wonderful. Although the conclusion is not right, it's not far from it. Although the first person Tetragon likes is not me, it's my master. Unfortunately, I can't give in on this issue no matter what. Today, even if I have to talk until my saliva is dry, I must bluff the old Daoist Hichu into marrying Tetragon." As a result, before he could open his mouth to show his skill, he heard Hichu say, "The matter of marriage is of great importance, so it must be carefully considered again and again. Moreover, the premise of the marriage is to end the grand competition first. Although I have no objection to this matter, it will be very difficult to carry it out." Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Old ginger is indeed spicier. In just a few words, he has already changed the topic. Among the older generation of cultivators, Hichu Doran's character was relatively simple and vigorous. Qianghua said that a gentleman could be deceived by his own means, but the premise was that Hichu Daoran had the character of a gentleman. As a result, this old gentleman also resolutely began to play tricks in the face of marriage, sacrificing his character to hold his virginity. The resistance to the marriage was not small, so he had to put more effort into it. As for the resistance to end the grand competition, he had already expected it. From the preparation to the implementation of the grand competition, almost all the forces of the immortal cultivation world in 9 regions had been mobilized, and even international friends from the Western continent had come to help. Such a grand event was like a war chariot that was extremely heavy, rolling forward with unstoppable momentum. Even the driver of the chariot could only slightly adjust the direction of the chariot, and it was absolutely impossible for it to stop abruptly. Especially recently, with the efforts of Wang Lu, the Wanxian League finally reversed its decline and began to stride towards victory. If the organizing committee suddenly claimed that the grand competition had lost its meaning and asked everyone to go back to their own homes, perhaps the instant anger would be enough to make the Wanxian League collapse. Therefore, even if the grand competition was to end, it must be done slowly and steadily. Today, he found Hichu Daoran, which was also a high-level communication. If it were to be carried out, he didn't know how many meetings and discussions would be held. However, if the action is too slow, Tetragon may not be willing to wait. In my observation, Tetragon is a person who either doesn't do it or does it swiftly and decisively. In many cases, he doesn't even care if the people around him can keep up. Therefore, the end of the grand competition can't be done according to the normal process. Then what are you going to do? Hichu Daoran saw that Wang Lu looked calm when he spoke. Obviously, he already had a plan, so he directly asked. Wang Lu said, "There's no need to tell everyone the truth. Just say that the Dixian side requests to change the form of the competition and still regard it as a kind of grand competition. In fact, Tetragon's fight against the Wanxian League alone does have something in common with the grand competition to some extent." Qianghua Fairy pondered for a moment and said, "But the specific organizational form of the grand competition was finally determined and accepted after many discussions. A reason is always needed for a sudden change. In particular, this matter was proposed by the Dixian side, so the resistance is even greater." Wang Lu said, "So we need a story that can convince everyone." Qianghua said, "I'd like to hear the details. I've tried to imagine it. It can be roughly said that the purpose of the grand competition is to strengthen communication and enhance friendship in the competition. However, after the start of the competition, a few Dixian people, led by Bai Zhe and Black, ignored the overall situation, stirred up trouble, stirred up a bloody storm, and brewed a deep hatred between the Wanxian League and Dixian, destroying the good situation of unity and friendship. Tetragon was once a highly respected predecessor and leader of Dixian. Because of his heavy injury, he fell into eternal sleep. After this unexpected resuscitation, he soon understood what happened and felt angry and ashamed of the behavior of Bai Zhe and the others. Thus, he set things right and exiled the former regime. Then, because of the mistakes made by Dixian's companions, he felt deeply guilty and decided to atone in his own way, which was to take all the competitions alone. After a series of stories were told, Wang Lu looked up at Hichu and Xianghua and said, "What do you think of this story? Is it very convincing?" Hichu Daoran pondered and said, "Is this pushing the responsibility to those exiled Dixian people? Isn't this a bit? Black deserves it, but Xian Mo is innocent." Wang Lu said, "There's no other way. Compared with Tetragon on the stage, Xian Mo has no value. This is the use of waste. Tetragon has a deep hatred for those people. As long as she is still on the stage, Bai Zai, Xian Mo, and the others can't come back." Hichu Daoran was silent for a while and no longer spoke, reluctantly acquiescing. Xianghua closed her eyes and sighed, "This is just your opinion. What if Tetragon refuses to cooperate with you to tell the story? I think if Tetragon is as proud and arrogant as you said, he should disdain telling such a lie." Wang Lu said, "So this goes back to the original problem. Please marry her quickly and use pillow talk to make her give up her principles." "Let me think about it." Hichu frowned and seemed to be vaguely tempted. Wang Lu knew that haste makes waste. It was very difficult to fool Hichu in one breath, especially when there was Qianghua next to him, whose intelligence was no less than his. Today, it was already a success to make Hichu Daoran say, "Let me think twice." Thereupon, Wang Lu didn't waste any time and directly bid farewell to He. Tuesday Qianghua stood up to send him off. When Wang Lu was sent out of the tower, the girl's cold voice entered Wang Lu's ears. "Now that you are in a whirlpool, don't lose your way." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled and then smiled. "Don't worry." From the tower of Xingjing sect all the way back to the Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu felt a lot more relaxed and smiled all the way. However, when he arrived at the door, the smile froze on his face. A budding young girl with an immature face was leaning in front of the window sill, observing the decoration of the courtyard with great interest. Seeing Wang Lu, the corner of her mouth slightly hooked up, as if she was greeting him with a smile. Wang Lu was inwardly startled. "You are the dignified king of Dixian. Instead of showing off your strength in your own home, what are you doing here? And in such a dignified manner?" When Tetragon was surrounded by the purple aura of the emperor, like a ball of light, it meant that she was playing the role of the emperor. And when she showed her real body, it meant that she had to deal with private affairs. But the problem was, her marriage partner had been set to Taoist master He too, so why did she look for Wang Lu to deal with her private affairs? "Take me out for a walk." Tetragon always went straight to the point. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. "Go out? You mean?" Tetragon said, "After more than 10,000 years of sleep, I want to see what the 9 regions looks like now." Wang Lu smiled bitterly. "It's probably not good to see. It's not that it's not good to see, but it's not convenient to see." The king of Dixian suddenly walked out of the group of immortal tombs and set foot in 9 regions. The meaning of this was enough to cause countless shocks. Tetragon completely ignored it. She stepped forward and pulled Wang Lu's hand. "Let's go, take me to see your sect first." Wang Lu earnestly said, "You previously promised to marry Master He too, and now you are already a bride-to-be. How can you be entangled with a strange man like me?" Tetragon looked at him and said, "In that case, I can also change the marriage partner to you." Wang Lu immediately changed his mind. The Lingjian School is located on Spirit Sword Mountain in Blue River region. Chapter 712. "Oh, this is the Blue River region?" Tetragon stood on the purple cloud and frowned slightly. Wang Lu explained from the side, "Among the 9 regions, the Blue River region is located on the border. The population is not very dense, the resources are not very rich, and the surrounding spiritual energy is not very abundant. Moreover, this place used to be the battlefield of the Great War of Immortals and Demons, so you can't see the flourishing of flowers. But then again, in the view of ancient people like you, compared with the prosperous day of the Immortal Path, I'm afraid 9 regions is in ruins everywhere. Tetragon shook her head in silence and then looked down at the ground under her feet. The girl's eyes were as deep as the unfathomable sea. Her eyes pierced through the layers of clouds and took a panoramic view of the common people. Wang Lu stood beside Tetragon on his flying sword, but his eyes didn't look down. Instead, he stared at the girl's eyes, looking at the sky and earth reflected in her deep eyes. In a trance, Wang Lu seemed to have a slight sense of empathy with Tetragon and obtained the perspective of the Dixian king. In her eyes, the hundreds of millions of creatures in the Blue River region were like ants, and the rich spiritual veins were like thin snakes, within her reach. The vast land, the mountains and rivers were all under her control. Even the obviously elusive karma and timeline showed some clues. After a long time, Tetragon withdrew her gaze and let out a sigh of emotion. This is the Blue River region. Wang Lu suddenly realized that Tetragon actually didn't care about the decline of the immortal path after the Age of Chaos, nor did she care about whether the 9 regions was in ruins or prosperous. She just sighed with emotion that after her 16,000 years of sleep, the world had changed into mulberry fields. The former Blue River region must not be like this. At that time, there was no Spirit Sword Mountain, no Lingjian School, and no Great Ming Country's host palace. However, there was also the immortal cultivation world, and there were many cultivators who cultivated and lived there. And that was the Blue River region that Tetragon was familiar with. However, Tetragon didn't waste time on unnecessary sentimentality. The girl stopped in the air for a moment and then reached out to the west. The next moment, the layers of clouds opened, revealing a lonely and proud mountain shadow in the distant sky, like a sharp sword piercing the sky. Spirit Sword Mountain? Wang Lu nodded. The place that Tetragon pointed out was the place where the Feng Shui line in the Blue River region gathered the densest spiritual energy. There was no other choice other than Spirit Sword Mountain. Let's go. Take me there. She said that she wanted Wang Lu to take her with him, but as soon as Tetragon's voice fell, he forcibly pulled Wang Lu's hand. The two of them flashed and crossed thousands of rivers and mountains. From the border of Blue River region near Cloud region, they came to the foot of Spirit Sword Mountain. Dixian's movement technique was indeed impressive. After landing, Tetragon was a little curious. There's a town here? Wang Lu said. Lingxi Town is the intersection point between Lingjian School and the mortal world. Tetragon interrupted. Why do we have to interact with the mortal world? Isn't Lingjian School one of the 5 super sects? Wang Lu thought for a moment. According to the historical records, in ancient times, the immortal cultivation world flourished, but correspondingly, the gap between the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world was deeper than it was now. In that era, the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world were different. In this regard, Wang Lu could only say, the times have changed. Tetragon frowned but didn't say anything. He just followed Wang Lu to walk on the town's path. Soon, his attention was attracted by this town that had the characteristics of both the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world. From time to time, the girl stopped in front of a building and then fell into a long contemplation. No one knew what she was thinking about. Wang Lu was only responsible for accompanying her and then greeting those familiar but old faces in the town. More than 30 years ago, in this town, an immortal gathering allowed him to set foot on the immortal cultivation world. More than 30 years later, he still remembered the series of puzzles at the town's gate. It was just that the old man who guarded the gate at that time had died of old age 20 years ago. On the day of his death, Wang Lu personally presided over a religious ceremony for him. Now, the people guarding the gate were the grandchildren of the old man, 2 tall and strong young men. After seeing Wang Lu, they greeted him very enthusiastically, but there was a bit of Philistinism in their enthusiasm. For mortals, even a foundation establishment cultivator was a supreme immortal, let alone Wang Lu. Wang Lu didn't care about the thoughts of these mortals. The lifespan of cultivators was long, and their concept of time was also different. In the immortal cultivation world, more than 30 years passed in the blink of an eye, but in the mortal world, it was enough to separate 2 generations. Wang Lu also felt a bit sentimental in his heart. If it was like this in 30 years, what about 16,000 years? For Tetragon, this world was already completely unfamiliar. Among the people of her generation, only 100 or so of her companions had survived, and a considerable number of them had been personally exiled by her. Thinking of this, Wang Lu suddenly remembered a place. "I'll take you to taste the special delicacies here." Thus, the two of them arrived at the Ru family inn. More than 30 years had passed, and many things in the Spirit Creek town had changed, except for this inn. The two wooden doors were half open, revealing a bit of bleakness and dilapidation. Wang Lu pushed the door open and entered. He saw the lady boss dozing off on the counter. The soft sound of her snoring was particularly clear in the quiet inn. However, in a trance, a different scene appeared in front of Wang Lu's eyes. The inn was overcrowded with people. The relatives of the emperor from all over the 9 regions had gathered here, sharpening their swords for the immortal gathering, fighting and scheming against each other. And the hardy girl behind the counter was wild with joy at this rare flow of customers. Taking a deep breath and restraining his thoughts, Wang Lu walked a few steps to the front of the counter. While putting down a large ingot of silver, he said, "Miss, wake up to receive the guest." The next moment, the girl, who was still dozing off, threw a punch at him without thinking. Wang Lu laughed and stretched out his hand to receive the punch. As a result, with a muffled bang, his whole body flew back 30 feet. He somersaulted in mid-air before steadily landing on the ground. Shaking his sore wrist, Wang Lu sighed. "Sure enough, it's easy to forget things after a long time. I didn't even remember that your iron fist can break all kinds of techniques." "Humph, quickly move your face closer, I'll let you remember it more clearly." "Speak, what are you doing here?" The lady boss was obviously angry when she woke up, and spoke ill of the rare guest. However, when she saw the girl beside Wang Lu, she suddenly put on a businesslike smile. "Dear guest, are you here to eat or to stay?" Wang Lu sighed. "Changing your face like flipping a book in front of others isn't very good, is it?" "We're here to eat, just bring out your specialties." The lady boss agreed and ran to the kitchen with enthusiasm. After a while, she came back and said, "There's only white rice, salt, and well water left in the kitchen. Why don't I make saltwater rice for you?" Back then, an inn with an average daily turnover of millions has been run to this state by you. You're quite capable. "Humph, I'm happy to." The two of them bickered. Suddenly, Tetragon's gaze turned to the lady boss. "Nine-tailed celestial fox?" The lady boss was startled. "You can see it? You have good eyesight." "It's been many years since anyone could see the little fellow hidden in my body at a glance. But don't be afraid, the seal is tight, it can't jump out." Tetragon ignored her and turned to ask Wang Lu. "Why did the Lingjian school take in a 9-tailed celestial fox in such a close place?" "That's an evil beast that can't be tamed, the source of disaster." Wang Lu said, "Anyway, it's already sealed in her body, so it doesn't matter if it's a disaster or not. Also, look at this seal carrier." As he said that, he pointed at the lady boss. Young and beautiful, pleasing to the eye, versatile, and has an iron fist to break spells. It's better to keep it. Being praised by Wang Lu as youthful and beautiful, the lady boss's cheeks flushed, but she tried to put on an unhappy look. She coldly snorted. "Boring." After a pause, she said, "I'm going to buy some vegetables." Wang Lu smiled. "Sure, I haven't tasted your cooking for a long time." However, Tetragon said coldly, "No need, I don't have the habit of sitting at the same table with a 9-tailed celestial fox." The lady boss was stunned, and her expression became a little complicated. She wasn't angry, but more of a strange one. As the seal carrier of the 9-tailed celestial fox, she had encountered some strange looks over the years, but such blatant discrimination and exclusion was really rare. Even the cultivators of the Lingjian school, who were the most hurt by the 9-tailed celestial fox, were polite to her. In fact, as the seal carrier, she bore the risk of the 9-tailed celestial fox breaking out of the seal, and bore the side effect of being unable to cultivate. She should be the one who was owed, so what reason did she have to be discriminated against? Seeing that the atmosphere in the shop quickly became awkward, Wang Lu sighed to Tetragon. You want me to take you to visit the Lingjian school? No problem, but please show me the attitude of a spectator, and shut up when you shouldn't talk. For this rude rebuke, Tetragon didn't care. The corner of his mouth slightly raised. I really can't control the affairs of your sect, but the nine-tailed celestial fox has been an ominous sign since the Age of Desolation. You guys are on your own. With that, she got up and left, heading toward the Spirit Sword Mountain. Wang Lu apologized to the lady boss and helplessly followed. It was just that, after all, he was in a hurry, so he didn't notice that there was a trace of inexplicable haze on the face of the girl behind him. Chapter 713. On Spirit Sword Mountain, a man and a woman walked side by side on the mountain road. As the woman walked, her eyes penetrated the clouds and went straight to the depths. Although the two were at the foot of the mountain, in a moment, the woman had a general view of Spirit Sword Mountain, including the disciples who cultivated on the mountain. Thus, she asked a question. This is your Lingjian school? As one of the 5 super sects, why are there so few people? Wang Lu thought for a moment. If this question was to be explained, it would take a long time. For example, the culture of Lingjian school was to value quality over quantity. In those days, when pretentiousness became the norm, it was declared that only those who could, in theory, ascend to immortality could enter the mountain. The Blue River region where it was located was not rich, and its high-end resources could not support too many people. The most important thing was that after a catastrophe 150 years ago, the accumulation of many years was wiped out overnight. The Golden Generation and the high-level elders were all killed and injured, and many of the cultivators in the sect were also scattered. Later on, the ruins were rebuilt, and of course, the number of people withered. However, these problems were almost all the sad things of Lingjian school, so Wang Lu was too lazy to mention them, so he simply said, because we are poor. Tetragon nodded and no longer spoke. Wang Lu suddenly exclaimed, do you know how to chat? I'm just making up a reason, don't just believe it, okay? Not long after, the two came to the 4-phase peak. Wang Lu explained that this place was a transportation hub and showed him the transmission array used by Lingjian school. Tetragon observed for a moment and was obviously interested in this kind of array. However, after trying it out, he did not comment. Along the transmission array, Wang Lu first took her to the Misty Peak. At this time, most of the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall, including the sect leader Feng Yin, were in the City of Immortals. There were only 2 elders on the mountain. Considering their temperament, Wang Lu did not take Tetragon to see them. Moreover, with Tetragon's current identity, it was not appropriate for him to meet with the people of the Wanxian League. It was enough for him to bear the crime of meeting with Dixian alone. Therefore, he led the way straight to the Misty Peak cafeteria. If there was anyone on the Spirit Sword Mountain who didn't care about the charge of meeting with Dixian, it was her. Aya, a distinguished guest has arrived. Quickly come out and receive the guest. Quickly prepare a few tables of look up at the starry sky and others. As Wang Lu greeted the people in the cafeteria, he explained to Tetragon, this is the most famous legendary cafeteria in our Spirit Sword Mountain. There is a supreme-level peerless chef here. Before he could finish speaking, Tetragon frowned and said, you're a true monarch cultivator. You're not thinking about breaking through your seclusion and ascending, but cooking here? Wang Lu said, everyone has their own ambitions. Moreover, among the 3,000 great Daos, the immortal Dao may not be the only way to reach the top. The head chef of this cafeteria was a fanatic who was obsessed with cooking, trying to reach the peak of perfection. The stargazing technique can be said to have reached the acme of perfection, enough to make a perfected sovereign faint. He fainted? Oh, he fainted. After Wang Lu corrected himself, he continued to talk nonsense. In short, this person has entered the Tao through cooking, and is close to achieving the Tao. Is it an outside path? Upon hearing this, Tetragon's brows were still tightly knitted, but he didn't say much. It was just that, when he entered the cafeteria and saw the blonde Western Continent chef, Tetragon was really taken aback. Western Continent people? How could you put this kind of person in the key place of Spirit Mountain? Wang Lu was stunned. What? What's wrong with that? Aya, who had just put on her apron, was also baffled. How did she provoke this distinguished guest? Tetragon earnestly said, "Those who are not of my race must have a different heart." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu smiled. Unexpectedly, Tetragon was actually a standard nationalist. Speaking of which, when the Dixian built the group of immortal tombs, they also traveled to the western continent and cooperated with Golden King. This matter should be mutually beneficial for both sides, and the Dixian did not seem to discriminate against foreigners at all. Yet, Tetragon was actually so radical? Or was it because there was a hidden danger in the cooperation with Golden King that made Tetragon so radical? However, no matter what the reason was, it seemed that today's meal could not be eaten. Wang Lu deeply regretted this. He didn't care about anything else, but it was a pity that he couldn't see the king of Dixian eating the look up at the starry sky. After leaving the Misty Peak cafeteria, Wang Lu was in a bit of a dilemma. Where should they go next? This was the view that those who are not of my race must have a different heart, so the area that Wang Lu could take her to visit was very limited. Not to mention Elder Guanhai on the clear sky peak, for a Kunlun slave to be an elder, in the eyes of Tetragon, perhaps it was blasphemy. On the non-phase peak, there were also a number of domestic spirit dogs. Mountain spirit by Shixian was one thing, but the reputation of a certain western continent demon wolf was even worse than that of the nine-tailed fox. The stellar peak was the residence of the sect leader. Now that the sect leader himself was not there, it didn't make sense to take Tetragon there. After thinking about it, he could only take her to visit the new disciples of the Misty Peak and Carefree Peak. In this regard, Tetragon was quite interested. No matter which era, young cultivators meant the future. Through them, it was easier to see the rise and fall of the immortal cultivation world in the next 100 years. However, after seeing the inner and outer court disciples of the Misty Peak and Carefree Peak, Tetragon was extremely disappointed. Are they the average level of your younger generation? Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, "Not really, because now I'm excluded. If I'm included, the average level can rise by a big step." Upon hearing this, Tetragon still shook his head. "Not at all." Wang Lu said, "You've been in contact with me for a long time, so your eyes have become picky. In fact, they are still outstanding. For example, this cultivator Zhu Qin, who has been cultivating for more than 30 years, has now reached the peak Shudan stage, which is quite good." With that, he pointed his finger at a handsome young man on the Misty Peak. However, the person whom Wang Lu pointed at looked slightly embarrassed. Zhu Qin. This name carried far more weight in the Spirit Sword Mountain more than 30 years ago than it did now. Because in the 2 years after the Immortal Gathering, his progress was the fastest among the same group of cultivators, even faster than Wang Lu. In fact, at that time, everyone's progress was faster than Wang Lu's. Wang Lu's body refining stage made his progress fall behind by a large margin. At the same time, Zhu Qin's glory in the Misty Peak was infinite. Among his peers, some admired him, some were jealous of him. However, no matter what kind of attitude they had, it only served to highlight his extraordinary status. At the same time, because he was good at socializing, the seniors also took care of him. To put it more exaggeratedly, although at that time, he was an inner court disciple, and Wang Lu was a successor disciple, whose rank was higher than him, in terms of reputation within the sect, perhaps he was even stronger. But, what about now? One was a young outstanding talent whose name shook the world, while the other was still cultivating in the mountain, unknown to anyone. Was peak Shudan stage cultivation that great? Compared to some of his senior brothers and senior sisters, it was indeed a lot stronger, but compared to Wang Lu? Compared to the other 2 successor disciples? Thinking of the days when he and Wang Lu ridiculed each other in the Ting Cloud Hall, it seemed like a lifetime had passed. Today's Wang Lu was already an existence that would make the back of his neck ache when he looked up at him. Of course, Wang Lu would not care about the unpleasant things that happened in the past with Zhu Qin. For him, the dispute at that time was more like an anecdote, especially after resuscitation of the memory of his previous life. How could he care about these real juniors? But now, Wang Lu's generous attitude was sometimes more hurtful. At least, although Zhu Qin forced a smile on his face, the loneliness in his heart was almost overflowing. At this time, Tetragon suddenly pointed to a figure quietly retreating from the crowd. "Who is that?" Wang Lu turned his gaze and said with a smile, "Wang Zhong, also an outstanding talent in the Lingjian school. Although he is not as good as Zhu Qin and other talented disciples, he is also above the standard." Above the standard? Tetragon obviously scoffed at this evaluation, but compared to cultivation, she was more concerned about another thing. This person seems to have a record of rebellion. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. "You can even see this? Aren't you a bit too much?" Tetragon turned a blind eye to this nonsense. The dignified king of Dixian could see through the past and present lives of a shoot-on-stage little cultivator at a glance, so how could he not see that Wang Zhong and Wang Lu were inextricably linked? In fact, it's not a big deal. A good bird chooses a tree to nest in, and Wang Zhong happened to be blind and followed the wrong person. Tetragon asked, "In any case, betrayal should be an indisputable fact. That being the case, why do you tolerate a traitor around?" Wang Lu remembered Tetragon's attitude toward traitors and understood her question. However, not everyone hated evil as much as she did. Moreover, from a practical point of view, I tolerate him because it doesn't matter. Can a mere Wang Zhong overturn the sky? Wang Lu smiled. In the end, he's just one of the tens of thousands of ordinary cultivators in 9 regions. Do you want me to care about such a lowly person? Tetragon seriously said, "There are some things that are worth your care." However, after saying this, Tetragon turned around and no longer said anything. "I've seen Lingjian school, take me to Xingjing sect." This guy really went wherever he wanted. Wang Lu sighed. "Okay, let's go to Xingjing sect." Going to Xingjing sect couldn't be as free as going to Lingjian school. He had to prepare in advance and make an appointment to enter, which was not an ordinary trouble. Fortunately, the relationship between Wang Lu and he too was not ordinary. Thus, he directly used his personal channel to greet he too, thus the journey was smooth. Xingjing sect was far bigger than Lingjian school. The headquarters of Xingjing sect alone was dozens of times bigger than Spirit Sword Mountain. It also had a large population, and the quality of the population was extremely high. It was truly a place where the king pill could be found everywhere, and Yuanying stage cultivators were as many as dogs. Such a magnificent scene made Wang Lu sigh with emotion. Xingjing sect was indeed worthy to be the head of the Wanxian League. The gap between them and the other sects was really too big, especially when they just transferred from Lingjian school. However, when Tetragon visited Xingjing sect, he seemed careless and even absent-minded. The two of them held the pass issued by Hichu Daoran and circled around the headquarters a few times. Tetragon didn't even ask a few questions before he felt tired. "I've seen enough here, take me to Royal Soldier sect." Wang Lu stopped and said, "Do you want to go on a one-day tour of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League?" Chapter 714. Wang Lu's words came true. In one day, Tetragon really went to all the 5 super sects of the Wanxian League. Whether it was just a cursory glance or an ulterior motive, in short, she completed this feat as if there was no one else around. This action naturally couldn't be concealed. Tetragon's action was too high-profile. In Lingjian school, she still showed her true face, which looked like a 13 or 14 years old girl, which could barely be regarded as unattractive. However, starting from Xingjing sect, Tetragon restored her imperial purple aura, like a purple sun in the sky, shining brightly, wishing to attract the eyes of the people in the world to look at her. At this point, the whole world knew that Wang Lu and the leader of the Dixian sect traveled hand in hand in the 9 regions. During this period, naturally, gossip raged. There were rumors that Wang Lu had defected to the enemy, and there were deep scheming people who speculated that Wang Lu took the opportunity to spy on the secrets of the several sects. Of course, There were also many hardcore fans of Wang Lu who claimed that Wang Lu was playing a big game of chess that ordinary people couldn't understand. Although it seemed inappropriate to take Tetragon to travel the 9 regions, it must be for the overall interest of the 9 regions. At present, the most credible speculation was that Wang Lu was displaying his masculine charm, subduing the enemy without a fight. Of course, this speculation made many of Wang Lu's female fans sad. However, among them, the die-hard fans said that even if Wang Lu lost her virginity, for the great cause of the 9 regions, they would never change their love for Wang Lu because of this. Thus, naturally, there were many cynical bystanders, and then there was a big debate about whether Wang Lu was worthy of such love. Those who supported and those who opposed each stuck to their own views. Not to mention the war of public opinion caused by Tetragon's one-day tour. From the point of view of the parties involved, this day was really terrible. Wang Lu didn't mind being a tour guide. As a contemporary native of 9 regions, it was proper for him to show his hospitality to the former native who had transmigrated 16,000 years ago. The problem was that Tetragon was not a good tourist. This guy really didn't know how to chat. On Spirit Sword Mountain, he didn't sit at the same table with the 9-tailed fox, saying that those who are not of the same race must have a different heart. In Royal Soldier Sect, it became even more severe. As soon as he entered the mountain, he frowned and said, "Why is this place filled with barbarian energy? It's clearly a holy land for immortal cultivators, but it's like a barbarian tribe." The age of chaos obscured the heavenly secrets and dried up spiritual energy, so cultivation methods were lost and the path of immortals declined. It's not hard to understand, but why did the later generations of cultivators also lose their cultural connotation? Wang Lu thought for a moment. This topic was too complicated. The rise of Royal Soldier Sect at least began during the Great War of Immortals and Demons, so he could only summarize it in one sentence: because we are poor. After the end of the Age of Chaos, 9 regions was so barren that there was no need to ask for high-end things like cultural connotation. As a result, Tetragon accepted this explanation very seriously. He nodded and said, "So that's how it is." After the two of them circled around the Royal Soldier Sect and roughly browsed through the situation of the mountain, Senior Gem Emperor made a concluding statement. "You said that the Royal Soldier Sect is a martial arts sect and has outstanding military strength among the 5 uniques. But why do I see that the military strength here is just a so-so? There's nothing special about it." Wang Lu was shocked. "Girl, do you usually speak so loudly?" Tetragon's comment was like the first thunder in spring, which shocked the whole mountain. Originally, the two of them circled around the mountain. Although the Emperor's purple cloud was very high profile, the cultivators on the mountain had already been notified in advance. Knowing that this was a special situation, they ignored it. However, Tetragon's next sentence was so arrogant that it immediately ignited the anger of Royal Soldier Sect. At that time, a group of soldiers flew out to argue with Tetragon. Fortunately, they were stopped by Xiang Liang in time, otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. In fact, Tetragon's point of view could not be said to be wrong. Royal Soldier Sect was famous for its military strength, but purely in terms of military strength, it was by no means the first in the Wanxian League. Because before Royal Soldier Sect, there was still Xingjing Sect. In the Wanxian League, the number 1 in wealth, number 1 in power, number 1 in influence, number 1 in comprehensive fighting power. Like a giant, Xingjing Sect occupied the top of almost all the lists. Although Royal Soldier Sect was strong, they could only occupy the second place. However, this situation was common sense in the Wanxian League, so Tetragon didn't know about it. She had just seen Xingjing Sect, so when she looked at Royal Soldier Sect, she naturally felt that it was unworthy of its name. Moreover, her outspokenness naturally aroused the dissatisfaction of Royal Soldier Sect. In this regard, Tetragon calmly said, "The words of the Emperor are like thunder in the ears. Do you think I need to hide my opinion from others?" Wang Lu was sincerely convinced. "May I ask, when your Majesty enjoys sex, are you also so frank and earth-shattering?" Upon hearing this, Tetragon gawked, but she was not angry. Instead, she showed a puzzled expression, as if she was thinking about how to answer Wang Lu's question. Wang Lu was taken aback again. Does this kind of question still need to be thought about? Don't tell me Tetragon, a dignified emperor, doesn't have this kind of experience? Do you still need to think about it? The more he looked at Tetragon's reaction, the more Wang Lu felt that his speculation was correct. Inwardly, he couldn't help but feel awe for her. No wonder she could stand out in the ancient era of the immortal path. As an emperor, she didn't think about building a harem and expanding the number of gigolos. And judging from her age and cultivation base, presumably, she had already practiced her virgin technique to several hundred layers of heaven, which was comparable to He Tu, Feng Yin, and the others. With the lesson of royal soldier sect, Wang Lu certainly didn't want to take her to Kunlun Immortal World and 10,000 Arts sect to look for trouble. However, who could stop what Tetragon insisted on doing? It's fine if you don't go, I'll go by myself. Considering the emperor temperament of Tetragon, Wang Lu had to follow him for the peace and development of 9 regions. And the result was naturally as expected. In Kunlun Immortal Mountain, Tetragon commented, "Is this the oldest and most orthodox immortal cultivation sect? And it's also known as the origin of immortal cultivation?" Wang Lu's heart skipped a beat, as if he saw a rude and unreasonable chef who ran to a specialty restaurant in a foreign place to challenge it. He quickly explained, "The immortal cultivation world must keep pace with the times. We must combine the excellent parts of traditional culture with modern technology and give full play to our strengths." Before he could finish his words, Tetragon had already turned around and left, which made Wang Lu, who was halfway through his words, feel particularly uncomfortable. After a while, Tetragon said, "Since you said that this Kunlun Immortal Mountain is a combination of traditional and modern, why do I only see a heavy atmosphere of lethargy in the mountain? Where's your so-called keeping pace with the times?" Wang Lu thought for a moment and then blurted out, "Recently, Kunlun Immortal Mountain organized a spring outing for the new disciples. The ones left in the sect are all old guys, so it's easy to make people feel lethargy." This time, Tetragon didn't easily believe it. However, when they arrived at 10,000 Arts sect, Tetragon still went his own way. "Is this the most complete library of immortal cultivation methods in 9 regions?" Wang Lu said yes, and Tetragon said yes. This was too insincere, but it was known to all. Although Wang Lu was high up in the clouds, he could clearly feel the scorching eyes of countless cultivators in 10,000 Arts sect. Therefore, he had to ask on behalf of those people below him, "Do you think their collection is not rich enough?" Tetragon bluntly said, "In terms of ancient books alone, it's not as good as what I've learned." Wang Lu said, "You're an ancient person, isn't it a bit unfair to compare the number of ancient books with the modern people? I mean, there are several classics written by later generations, such as Golden Lotus and so on, haven't you read them?" With that, Wang Lu felt the scorching eyes below him, but he was too lazy to care about it. After taking Senior Gem Emperor around the 10,000 Arts sect and seeing the demeanor of this sect, Wang Lu concluded, 10,000 Arts sect has an extremely special position in the immortal cultivation world. In addition to their outstanding strength, they are the strongest driving force for the technological progress in the immortal cultivation world. The number of methods they have invented and improved are more than that of Xingjing sect. However, before he could finish, Tetragon asked, "Is there any improvement that can directly lead to the path of ascension?" Wang Lu sighed. "You're just bickering. After the age of chaos, how could there be any method that can lead to the path of ascension?" In general, for the whole day, Wang Lu was tired of dealing with Tetragon's endless provocative bickering questions. After browsing the scenery of the 5 sects, he was physically and mentally exhausted. Fortunately, Tetragon didn't go any further. He wanted to see the next level major sections. After seeing the 10,000 Arts sect, he wanted to return to the group of immortal tombs. Wang Lu finally couldn't help but ask, "What exactly are you trying to do today?" Just as Tetragon was about to leave, he stopped. "In order to confirm the situation of 9 regions with my own eyes. Before this, I was only listening to the reports of your performance from those who woke up early. And they have never come out of the group of immortal tombs." Wang Lu asked, "In your opinion, what is the current situation of 9 regions?" Tetragon was silent for a moment, and then said, "During the resuscitation, Biyao was the first to find me and introduced the current situation of 9 regions to me. He said that the current 9 regions is weak and dilapidated. It's completely different from our expectation of the future generations. So in your opinion? Upon hearing this, Tetragon smiled slightly and said, although Biyao is a traitor, what he said at that time is indeed not wrong. The current 9 regions is declining and weak. Even if it inherits our legacy, it is absolutely difficult to resist the arrival of the fallen immortals. In the end, we were the losers at that time. How could the layout of the losers be so easy to calculate the winner? After listening to Tetragon's evaluation, Wang Lu shrugged and said, so what you saw today has strengthened your determination to command the overall situation? Tetragon said with a smile, whether I see it today or not, whether 9 regions is strong or weak, it will not change my determination to rule everything. I am the emperor, destined to rule the world. After a pause, Tetragon said, however, today I witnessed the current situation of 9 regions with my own eyes. It has strengthened my determination to protect you and help you. Huh? Senior Gem Emperor explained, when an emperor descends upon the world, it is not only supreme authority, but also supreme responsibility. I am admired by all living beings, and I must protect all living beings. With that, she faced Wang Lu and said, 9 regions is very weak. You can't compete with the fallen immortals alone. You need my help, and I will do my best to help you. Including the legacy in the depths of the group of immortal tombs, I will also share it with you. Of course, the premise of all this is that you need to submit to me. Chapter 7:15. After leaving behind a paragraph of emotion about the emperor, Tetragon returned to the group of immortal tombs alone. Standing on the clouds, Wang Lu recalled the words she said before she left. Tetragon was really an unexpected person. Wang Lu thought, if the person who resuscitation was not Biyao and the others, but Tetragon, would there be this farce of grand competition? Most likely not. If Tetragon was there would never be a gambling fight between Wang Wu and Biyao. Tetragon would directly stand up and challenge the entire Wanxian League of 9 regions, carrying the heavy burden with his own strength. Then, there would be no bloody killing at the beginning of the grand competition, and there would be no tit-for-tat counterattack from Wang Lu. And the situation would be much better than it was now. However, if there was no grand competition, perhaps he would not have today's status. Before the grand competition, Wang Lu could be regarded as a rising star among the senior cultivators. But now, he was on par with many high-level elders. If there was anyone in 9 regions who should thank the grand competition, Wang Lu should be the first. So, if the grand competition is over, I will be the target of public criticism. Wang Lu took advantage of the grand competition and now gained both fame and fortune. However, he cooperated with Dixian to end the grand competition, causing countless people's energy and resources to be wasted, and the huge layout of Mysterious Sky Mansion was in vain. No one knew how many people would be offended by this. Even if Wang Lu could give a reasonable explanation, and Senior Gem Emperor was willing to abandon the pride of the emperor to cooperate with him, this play could deceive the ignorant public, but how could it deceive the people with intentions and the parties involved? The loss of Mysterious Sky Mansion was real. Even if they accepted Wang Lu's explanation, someone had to be responsible for all this. However, in Wang Lu's view, these problems were not actually problems. Because at worst, he could just take the blame and resign. He became powerful because of the grand competition, but power was never his goal. As a cultivator, the immortal Tao was the eternal theme. Only those who found it difficult to make any progress in their cultivation, or those whose minds were not clear, would be obsessed with power in the world of cultivation. Compared to the exhausting position of chief planner, he was more interested in exploring the world after the King Pill. Although it had not been a long time since he reached the peak of King Pill, Wang Lu had been preparing for the Yuanying stage for a long time. If it were not for the grand competition, he would have been on the way to breakthrough. In any case, I have to report today's matter to Hichu first. After all, he is the number 1 person in 9 regions, so there is no reason for him to stay out of it. So that's how it is. In that case, although Tetragon is tyrannical and wanton, he is still a qualified emperor. In the tower of Xingjing sect in the City of Immortals, Hichu Daoran quietly listened to Wang Lu's report and sighed with emotion. Relatively speaking, she is easier to communicate with than the previous leaders of Dixian. Unfortunately. After sighing with emotion, Hichu said, I have already discussed with many elders about changing the grand competition. Generally speaking, it is feasible. You don't have to be under too much pressure. Hichu Doran's words could be regarded as setting the tone for this matter. Wang Lu deeply admired this. He and Senior Gem Emperor had only gone out for a day. In just one day, Daoist He was able to basically set the tone of this matter. He must have put in a lot of effort behind the scenes, and even gave up great benefits. He said that Wang Lu did not have to be under too much pressure. Obviously, he had taken the pressure on himself. In theory, Hichu Daoran did not have to do so much. Because the grand competition was proposed and designed by Wang Lu, and the specific implementation was mostly handled by this chief planner. Later, when things changed, it was also Wang Lu's first-hand contact. From the beginning to the end, Hichu Daoran had always been in the second line and delegated power. Therefore, he did have a reason to stay out of it. However, Hichu Daoran did not stay out of it. He was the number one person in the Wanxian League, enjoying the supreme glory of 9 regions, so naturally, he also had to bear the corresponding responsibility. Wang Lu's power was delegated by him, so he was duty-bound to meet problems. Hichu Daoran was not an emperor, but he also had the mind and spirit of an emperor. Wang Lu was deeply impressed by this. Nowadays, there were many people in leadership positions in the Wanxian League, but there were very few who really had the courage to lead. To put it nicely, everyone pursued the progress of the immortal path, so they were somewhat unconcerned about the so-called authority of leadership. To put it bluntly, it was purely selfish and lacking in breadth of mind. However, just as Wang Lu's favorable impression of He too increased, Hichu Daoran coughed. I have thought about the marriage issue for a long time. Hichu Daoran sternly said, this is indeed not feasible. I cultivate the virgin method, which not only has a high requirement for the physical body and primordial yang, but also for the karma connection. If I marry someone, even if the physical body is not touched, and the breath is not intertwined, once the marriage is formed, the karma will be entangled, and the virgin method will no longer be free. I have tried several ideas, but none of them can solve this problem. And the virgin method is the foundation of many of my methods, so it cannot be easily shaken. After thinking about it, I can't promise you this. I'm afraid you need to find another candidate. Qianghua added, I think Wang Lu, you're not bad. Wang Lu immediately retorted, I think you're not bad either. Tetragon only said to marry, but he didn't say that it's a male and female. You have always been famous for your talent and appearance, known as the number one fairy in 9 regions. You and Tetragon are simply a match made in heaven. What's more, she was originally going to marry Supreme He Tuesday. Since Supreme has difficulties, then you, as his disciple, are duty-bound to stand up for him. It's only right for a daughter to repay a father's debt. Qianghua said, I have no objection, but I'm afraid Tetragon will not agree. She is the emperor, and if one doesn't have a certain status, he is not qualified to marry her. Wang Lu said, isn't that simple? Why don't you just ask your master to arrange some important position for you? For example, the position of chief planner of the Grand Competition Organizing Committee is very good. The position of elder with real power in the Wanxian League can barely match it. Deceiving oneself will only have the opposite effect on Tetragon. Wang Lu thought that might not be the case. Based on Tetragon's identity as a veteran lover of virgin skill, if you have a big tool and live well, you can let her experience a different kind of fun, maybe even if you deceive yourself, she would still accept it. However, thinking about it in this way, Wang Lu instantly thought of a more suitable candidate than Qianghua and He Tuesday. No, it should be said that from this perspective, neither He Tu nor Qianghua was a good choice. One was a master of virgin skill, and the other was a disciple of a master of virgin skill. The two of them were young and immature, which would most likely be difficult to satisfy Tetragon. On Spirit Sword Mountain, there was a Yuanying stage elder with unique conditions and talent, who could be called invincible in 9 regions, Guanhai. With Elder Guanhai, perhaps no local in 9 regions would dare to compete with him for the title of having a big tool and live well. If he didn't mind, he might as well sell him to Tetragon. The picture of a budding girl with Elder Guanhai was simply too beautiful that it had to be seen. However, the marriage with Tetragon had not been finalized. Hichu Daoran could boldly help Wang Lu to change the grand competition, but he was not so bold as to put his lifelong happiness in the pit. He too was unwilling to sacrifice, and Wang Lu, of course, was also unwilling. Since these 2 people could not do it, the rest of the candidates were even more unreliable. Either they were already married, or their level was much lower than Tetragon's. Wang Lu tried to push his sex elder Ao Guanhai out as a surprise attack. As a result, the dignified 7th elder of Peak Yuanying stage was so scared that he directly went into seclusion in Clear Sky Peak. His degree of shyness was truly amazing. In short, when all the candidates could not meet the requirements, the matter had to be put on the agenda as soon as possible. On the contrary, the end of the grand competition had to be put on the agenda as soon as possible. To Wang Lu's relief, in this matter, Hichu Daoran spared no effort to support him. For this reason, Hichu Daoran personally came forward and held more than 10 emergency meetings to meet and consult with the leaders of all parties. The task was heavy and time was tight. How could it be easy to persuade tens of thousands of sects, large and small, in the Wanxian League, as well as rogue cultivators and even evil cultivators to accept this strategic change? During this period, a lot of expedient measures were used, compromises and concessions were everywhere. What's more, when they encountered stubborn people, Hichu Daoran was forced to use force to threaten them to solve the problem, which was obviously not the original intention of He Tuesday. Of course, it was not that Hichu Daoran was a pacifist. On the contrary, Xinjiang sect's force was the number 1 in 9 regions, so it was not an exaggeration to say that they were militaristic. However, Hichu Daoran always believed that the greatest role of force was deterrence, not threat. When it came to the threat level, it was inferior. Unfortunately, the situation forced him to do so. In short, the Wanxian League was in a state of chaos. The high-level elders spent the next few days in chaos and impatience. During this period, Tetragon was very considerate to leave time for the Wanxian League. He did not urge them, nor did he hinder the inertia of the grand competition. In the past few days, the 2 sides had played more than 10 matches, with both winning and losing. However, fewer and fewer people cared about the outcome. The ending of the competition was highly confidential within the Wanxian League. Except for a few people at the highest level, most people only got the news that the format of the grand competition needed to be adjusted. However, there was never a lack of smart people in 9 regions. From the wind blowing the grass, many people had already smelled the omen of a drastic change. For example, the newly rising business stars in the City of Immortals quietly laid out their plans under the direction of people with intentions, preparing for the next harvest. Another example was a bald cultivator who set Wang Lu as his goal and looked forward to showing off his skills in the grand competition. He began to feel restless and had a premonition that he had gradually lost all hope. Then, a large number of King Pill and Yuanying stage cultivators who were still in special training in Royal Soldier sect intuitively felt that the hard work of most of them in the past 6 months would be in vain. Chapter 7:16. In the lava cave of Royal Soldier sect, the cultivators, who had just finished a day of intense training, came to a clear pool in a valley surrounded by mountains to wash away the heat and impurities. In the special training program of Royal Soldier sect, an hour of rest time by the clear pool was very precious. Cultivators would often take this opportunity to chat and relax, in order to adjust their exhausted minds. This time was also the golden time for gossip to spread. On the bank of the clear pool, a young girl with delicate features and high spirits landed on the ground on an auspicious cloud. However, when she landed, she showed a solemn look. Her voice was neither too loud nor too small, just enough for dozens of people around her to hear. "Have you heard? There seems to be a major change in the grand competition. Soon." Someone came around and said, "Sister Tang, what's the new news?" The real name of the girl called Sister Tang was Tang Tang. In fact, she was younger than most of the people present, but her wide circle of friends was by no means comparable to ordinary people. From the elders of Heavenly Sage Hall and the Wanxian League to the peddlers and pawns in the mortal world, her friends were all over 9 regions, and she was very well informed. During the 6 months of special training, she could always bring the freshest and hottest gossip information, which injected a bit of cheerful air into the boring and tedious special training life. It was just that, this time, there was obviously no happy expression on Tang Tang's face. I heard from Elder Gu of Flowing Cloud School that the Heavenly Sage Hall has held several emergency meetings and decided to greatly streamline the existing projects of the grand competition. It is said that more than half of them will be cut. What? As soon as this remark came out, it was as if thunder exploded in the valley. Several cultivators immediately flew out of the pool, completely disregarding their nakedness and lack of clothes to cover themselves. What did you say? Is that true? Little Tang, don't joke around. This kind of thing is of great importance. Tang Tang gave those people a blank look and then swept her eyes across their bodies with a slightly playful look. You guys. When have I ever joked about this kind of thing? Elder Gu personally told me that. How could it be false? A young King Pill who didn't know the truth asked, why can't what Elder Gu said be false? It's not like he's some powerful figure. Hearing this, Tang Tang's pretty eyes widened. Even if he isn't some top big shot, he should at least show some sincerity if he wants to coax me into bed. Using fake news to deceive me, do you still want to sleep with me in the future? The young Jindan stage cultivator was dumbfounded and looked at Tang Tang incredulously. You mean? How could you? Just as the young King Pill had guessed, Tang Tang used her body to exchange for gossip. Among this batch of specially trained cultivators, she was the best at enjoying the pleasures of intimacy. Tang Tang was the eldest senior sister of the Yin-Yang sect 30 years ago. Later, because she was unwilling to be restricted by the sect's rules, she left the sect on her own. Now, with her cultivation at the peak of the King Pill, she was world famous for her countless bedmates. She was not a stunning beauty in the traditional sense, but a stunning beauty in the traditional sense definitely did not have such a powerful charm ability. From the elders at the peak of the Huashan realm to the ordinary people, no one could resist Tang Tang's charm. Tang Tang enjoyed the pleasures of intimacy between men and women. As long as she liked someone, she didn't care about the other party's beauty, wealth, or other conditions. On the other hand, if someone wanted to sleep with her, he didn't have to go through too much trouble. As long as she didn't dislike him, he only needed to provide her with some gossip or interesting stories to make her happy. There were many people who wanted to spend the night with Tang Tang, so Tang Tang always told endless gossip and stories. Now, most of the cultivators in the Deep Valley knew about Tang Tang's background. Some praised her freedom, and some despised her licentiousness. Tang Tang had seen many of these people, so she didn't care about them. At this moment, seeing the young man's expression, Tang Tang knew that he was the kind of righteous person she hated the most, who was serious and liked to meddle in other people's business. She said disdainfully, "It's my freedom to sleep with whoever I want. I like my life, so why do you care?" How can you say that? The young man immediately put on a righteous posture and wanted to argue with Tang Tang. Unfortunately, before he could open his mouth, he was pushed aside by a group of people. "Sister Tang, don't pay attention to that idiot. Hurry up and gossip." What did Elder Gu say? The grand competition wants to cut half of the items? Isn't that nonsense? Why? Tang Tang explained, the specific reason is not fully clear to Elder Gu, but it is said that there is a problem with Dixian. Someone launched a coup and exiled many of their companions. Now the size of Dixian camp has shrunk a lot. That's their own business. There's no reason for it to affect the grand competition. What does Heavenly Sage Hall think? They held emergency meetings continuously and finally compromised with them? Tang Tang said, "Not everyone in Heavenly Sage Hall knows the inside story, but Elder Gu said that it seems that the new leader of Dixian camp is a woman. Not long ago, Daoist Master Wang Lu of Lingjian School took her to visit the 5 super sects of the Wanxian League. Before her voice fell, there was an uproar in the deep valley. No way. Are you saying that Daoist Master Wang Lu betrayed the interests of the Wanxian League? He shouldn't be such a person, right? He has always been the big hero of the Wanxian League. Yes, not long ago, he plotted to kill several Dixian people. There is a blood feud between them. How could they inexplicably get together? I don't think it's easy to say. Didn't you hear Sister Tang say that the new leader of Dixian camp is a woman? Even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beauties. Daoist Master Wang Lu has been famous for so many years. Have you ever heard of him being particularly intimate with any woman? I heard that there are many beauties around him. Forget about the 2 successor disciples of Lingjian School. It is said that he doesn't even let go of his own master. It's all nonsense. As far as I know, although he has many beauties around him, he keeps a distance from anyone. That guy is very proud and arrogant. No cultivator of the same generation can enter his eyes. Otherwise, why would he, a king pill, always go to the elder generation cultivators? That makes sense. But in fact, the talent of this generation of cultivators is the most outstanding in the past 1,000 years. He can't even put women like Xianghua and Lu Li in his eyes, so I'm afraid there are only a few seniors who can satisfy him. Speaking of which, a strange woman who can launch a coup in Dixian camp and stand out may really tempt him. But we still can't disregard everything else just for a woman. Moreover, even if Wang Lu is confused, there is still Supreme He Tuesday. Forget it, everyone knows that Wang Lu is the son of Supreme He Tuesday. He treats Wang Lu better than his own fairy Qianghua. As long as it's Wang Lu's proposal, he has never rejected it. A group of people gathered together and discussed in full swing, emerging with all kinds of incredible speculations. Unfortunately, when people were in high spirits, the instructor of Royal Soldiers sect appeared and said to the crowd with a cold face, "The rest time is over, it's time for the next training." There was a sudden sigh in the valley, and the exchange of gossip had to stop. After that, the people were obviously a bit absent-minded. If Tang's gossip was right, more than half of the grand competition would be simplified, then perhaps many of their efforts would be in vain. What was the point of the special training if there was no opportunity to appear? Half a day later, in the 4 Element Sect station in the City of Immortals, a bald cultivator came to Shizhou Jin's room with a dignified face. "Master, about the grand competition, I heard, the grand competition will soon be over." Shizhou Jin said, "Now the news is that the way of the competition has changed. In fact, the competition will be cancelled, and the previous scores will be meaningless." Luo Xiao was silent. Other people might be shocked by such a result, but he had already speculated some of it through the clues. The cause of the matter is that a sleeping Dixian's suddenly resuscitation, and then. As a high-level member of Heavenly Sage Hall, Shizhou Jin naturally knew the changes in the past few days. He chose to tell Luo Xiao the ins and outs of the matter. So, there will still be a competition, but the scale will be much smaller. Because the opponent will be reduced from more than 100 people to 1 person. Even if Tetragon himself doesn't mind fighting endlessly, our Wanxian League has to save some face for ourselves. The number and scale of the competition will be limited. Now, I'm afraid it will be difficult for most of the players to get a chance to play. Luo Xiao said bitterly, "Including me?" Shizhou Jin nodded. "Including most of the King Pill level cultivators. I'm afraid that the competition with Tetragon will no longer be divided into stages, so it doesn't make sense for people with low cultivation base to play." Then, so many people, so many years of hard work, what is that? Shizhou Jin frowned. That's a stupid question. In this world, there is more than one thing where there is no result after hard work. What's more, after such a long time of special training, don't tell me you haven't gained anything. Luo Xiao looked up. "Master, you know what I want. The god of war blood doesn't need to be immersed in hard work, but a blood-boiling series of fierce battles. I need to compete with the most powerful cultivator in the world so that I can continue to break through in the victory and eventually surpass Wang Lu." And the most powerful cultivator in the world is Dixian. But now that the grand competition is over, my only chance is gone. Shizhou was silent for a moment. There will always be opportunities, it just depends on whether you can dig them out or not. Luo Xiao smiled bitterly. Right now, what I lack is the right opponent and the right battlefield. How can I dig out these things? Make enemies for no reason? Like a mad dog that bites anyone it sees? Shizhou fell into silence again. This time, he didn't speak again until Luo Xiao turned around and left. Because there was really no answer to this question. The reason why the god of war blood became extinct was probably because a long, long time ago, the inheritors of the bloodline finally couldn't find the answer. Chapter 717. In many cases, the truth did not exist objectively, but was artificially created from top to bottom. People's ability to observe was limited. A pair of eyes could not see through the secular world of 9 regions, and a pair of ears could not hear all the secrets of the world. Most of the information was obtained from all sorts of bystanders. If one looked at the dissemination of this information, one would find that it was a 3-dimensional network. This network was like a cone, from top to bottom, spreading rapidly from one point to multiple levels and dimensions. There were countless nodes on this cone. Most of the people on the nodes thought that what they knew was the truth, but they could not see that above their heads, in the distant place, was the source of everything. Alas, tomorrow is the first day of the new competition system. I don't know what the elders of the Wanxian League are thinking, but they suddenly changed the competition system halfway through. Some people say that Wang Lu has been bribed, but looking at the new competition system, no matter how you look at it, it's us who have the advantage. Yeah, Dixian is also sick in the head. How could they agree to this kind of condition? One person in charge of all the events of the grand competition, does he think he is a great principal golden immortal? Even if he is a great principal golden immortal, it is impossible to suppress all of us in the Wanxian League in all the events. We have all seen the events designed by Daoist Master Wang Lu. If there is no special training in advance, no matter how great your ability is, it will be useless. Ah, are you talking about the ultimate enhanced version of the test? This is like seeing a ghost. I, your father, have read a lot of books. I can recite at least tens of thousands of books backwards, but I can't even get 30% of the points for that set of broken questions. Ha ha ha, you still have 30%, but I have done 3 sets, which adds up to 30% of the points. That's too disgusting. I'm afraid that even a real great principal golden immortal would have a headache doing that kind of thing. Moreover, under the new competition system, I think there are still a lot of events that are similar to the line test. How much ability does that tetragon have to suppress so many of us? I think he's just not clear-headed. It is said that the guy just resuscitation from his sleep not long ago. As soon as he woke up, he went crazy and launched a coup. They probably don't know how powerful the Wanxian League is. They really think that their Dixian players are invincible. But I heard that not long after she woke up, she traveled the 9 regions hand in hand with Daoist Master Wang Lu, especially the 5 super sections. If you say that she knows nothing about the current cultivators, then... Speaking of this, I heard that the relationship between Daoist Master Wang Lu and that senior gem emperor is extraordinary. The degree of intimacy seems to be between a man and a woman. Could it be that the root cause of the other party agreeing to this bizarre condition is here? Perfected Wang Lu is really good at taking drastic measures, TSK. That's right. Previously, many people were talking about how he didn't choose one despite having so many female confidants. So it turns out that he left the position for Dixian. This level of taste and realm is something that others can only look up to. The above dialogue could be seen everywhere in 9 regions today. The grand competition system was changed, and Tetragon fought against 10,000 enemies alone. This was the truth that most people knew. Most of the people here referred to the mortals who mingled in the city of immortals, the cultivators who came from low-rank sects, the cultivators with mediocre aptitude, and the loose cultivators who got the inheritance by chance. As for the reason behind this, there were different opinions. Above this, some cultivators who came from big sects got the truth further. That Tetragon is really a great person. After resuscitation, she found out that her companions had killed the people of the Wuxia League. She deeply hated them, so she exiled the murderer and shouldered all the burden on her own shoulders. This courage. Although she is a woman, it's better than countless men. It's just that, she is too inconsiderate. It's good that she is willing to take responsibility, but this kind of competition would only make people think that she is arrogant. She is, after all, the king of Dixian, so it's understandable for her to be a little arrogant. Moreover, after all, the grand competition has been simplified by 70 to 80%. Although there are many tricky and eccentric ones, there are more bright ones. Maybe she has the ability to win more than half of the projects and make us lose face. However, if she's a person who is easy to talk to, it doesn't matter even if we lose to her. In any case, Wang Lu has already taken drastic measures to take drastic measures. We're all family, ha. For most of the upper and middle-level members of the Wuxia League, this was the truth of the sudden change in the grand competition, which was also the version that Wang Lu and Hichu Daoran decided to announce to the public. This was an out-and-out artificial truth. However, even so, only a few people in the Wuxia League knew about it. In fact, this dissemination technique was very clever, because people at the bottom would never be satisfied with what they already knew. As they continued to explore, this version of the truth would gradually spread and become the truth that people believed in. Only a few people at the top knew that things were more exaggerated than most people thought. According to the requirements of Tetragon, the grand competition was basically over, and the past points and rules were completely invalid. Under the new competition system, there were no project restrictions at all. As long as it was not too boring and absurd, anyone could go on stage to compete with Tetragon. And the outcome was not determined by the sum of the points. As long as the Wuxia League could win one of these countless games, Tetragon would admit defeat on behalf of Dixian. The conditions were so good that people could not find any reason to refuse. However, because the conditions offered by Tetragon were too good, people worried that there was something hidden behind it. People who had contact with Tetragon would not doubt her ability and wisdom. Since she dared to offer such conditions, she must really have the confidence to suppress the entire Wuxia League by herself. Where this confidence came from was still a mystery to this day. Daoist Master Wang Lu, in your opinion, how much hope do we have in tomorrow's preliminary competition? In the conference room of the Heavenly Sage Hall in the City of Immortals, the last meeting before the competition was coming to an end. All the matters had been arranged. Early the next morning, Tetragon would appear in the central arena of Immortal One area, waiting for the challenge of the Wuxia League. In theory, anyone could come on stage to challenge. Tetragon did not impose any restrictions on the challengers. However, in fact, the Wuxia League certainly would not let anyone come on stage to waste time. From the very beginning, everything went according to the plan in an orderly manner. The one who made the plan was still Wang Lu, because in the Wuxia League, only he had the most contact with Tetragon and was most likely to make a targeted arrangement. The ones arranged by Wang Lu in the first round were Supreme Tian Luan, who was responsible for the chess competition, the witch Dr. A Wu, who was responsible for poison, and the god of food Lu Li, who was responsible for food tasting. These three people seemed to be randomly selected. There were men and women, and their cultivation base ranged from supreme level to peak king pill. However, in fact, the three of them had one thing in common: they were all winners in the grand competition with a huge advantage. In other words, they had reached the peak in their respective fields, unparalleled. They were the candidates with the highest winning rate that the Union of 10,000 Immortals could send out. Therefore, in theory, such a lineup was the limit that the Wuxia League could achieve, which was equivalent to a trump card and a killing move. However, at the beginning of the competition, people could not see through Wang Lu's intention. Therefore, after the list was confirmed, someone asked Wang Lu about the Wuxia League's chances of winning tomorrow's match. You asked me how much hope I have, and I would like to say 10%, but unfortunately, we are probably going to lose tomorrow's match. Wang Lu responded to the question with an indifferent look, and then said, "Be prepared for a long-term struggle." Tetragon is not such a simple opponent. With that, he got up and left the venue, no longer paying attention to the questioning behind him. In fact, even Wang Lu couldn't figure out how Tetragon could win under the existing competition system. She could not be omniscient and omnipotent, and crush the hundreds of millions of cultivators of the Wanxian League with her own strength. At the same time, with Tetragon's temper, she disdained the shady business of stealing chickens and dogs. Since it was impossible to defeat her, and there was no shortcut, how could she win? On the other hand, Wang Lu had long been ready to lose. However, even if he lost, he had to understand why. He arranged a very strong lineup for the first day of the competition. The purpose was to see what was the card in Tetragon's hand. In this contest with Tetragon, the biggest advantage of the Wanxian League was the large number of people. Because of the large number of people, they could safely and boldly send people to test the opponent. One day later, Wang Lu's eyes widened. I lost. In the central arena of Immortal One area, Supreme Tianluan left a sentence and got up to abandon his chess piece. In front of him, on a huge chessboard with hundreds of vertical and horizontal lines, the black and white camps were inextricably entangled. The black chess pieces were shaped like evil dragons, fighting left and right on the chessboard. The white chess piece was like a graceful fairy, deftly defusing the attack of the evil dragon with ease. The side holding the black chess pieces was Supreme Tianluan. On the chessboard, it clearly seemed that he had a little initiative. Several big attacks were initiated by Supreme Tianluan, and Tetragon hastily responded to the battle, struggling to cope with the situation. At this time, although the situation on the chessboard was roughly equal, people thought that Supreme Tianluan had the upper hand. Who knew that at this time, Supreme Tianluan abandoned his chess piece and admitted defeat, which was stunning. The chessboard with hundreds of vertical and horizontal lines was too complicated, so people couldn't understand why Supreme Tianluan lost, but, after all, he lost. Not bad. You've only made this move and you've already decided that you'll lose. I've underestimated you. Supreme Tianluan smiled slightly, cupped his hands to the other side of the chessboard, and then floated away. At the same time, the chessboard on the field disappeared, and the fierce fight between the black and white chess pieces came to an abrupt end. Next, come on. Tetragon put away the chessboard without showing the slightest tiredness on her face, as if the 4-hour contest with Supreme Tianluan just now was nothing to her. The second to play was the witch doctor, Wu. The girl looked dignified and walked into the arena with a full set of witchcraft equipment. She had a bunch of colorful feathers on top of her head, and her face was painted with blood-colored patterns. She held a black skull in her right hand and a lantern in her left hand. Her cultivation base was mediocre, but her witchcraft was inherited from the Great Desolation era. In terms of skill alone, her witchcraft was no less than that of those great witch doctors who could summon the wind and summon the rain in the Great Desolation era. In the case that witchcraft was generally lost, even Dixien would find it difficult to beat her in this way. In this game, the Wanxian League's odds of winning were actually higher than Supreme Tianluan's. After all, there were thousands of people who could play chess, but there were only a few who were proficient in witchcraft in the Great Desolation era. However, half a day later, the result of this highly anticipated game came out. Well, I admit defeat. The witch doctor looked at the pile of black powder in her hand with great regret. Not long ago, it was an ancestor's skull that contained infinite witchcraft power, but at this time, it had lost most of its magical power. Even if it was used as an ingredient to raise witchcraft insects, the quality was not good enough. An ancient witch treasure was broken by Tetragon in this game, destroying its magical power. Chapter 7:18. I'm not willing, but I admit defeat. At the dining table, Lu Li's beautiful eyes were red and she was about to cry. She reluctantly put down the jade chopsticks in her hand and turned to Wang Lu, sobbing softly, "Senior brother, I'm sorry." Wang Lu touched her head and said, "No need to say sorry. You've tried your best. It's not that you're incompetent, it's that the enemy is too cunning." With that, Wang Lu looked at Tetragon, who had turned around and was ready to leave. Tetragon was indeed Tetragon. He was so powerful in all aspects that it was hard for people to even look at his back. In the first match, she defeated the number 1 divine fortune teller in 9 regions, Supreme Tian Luan. In the second match, she defeated the witch doctor A Wu with witchcraft. In the third match, she defeated Lu Li as a food connoisseur at the dining table. Whether it was the amount of food or the subtle identification of food, her performance was flawless. Even the trick that Wang Lu used to defeat the food immortal was ineffective against her. Tetragon had no flaws at all. Losing to such an opponent could not be said to be Lu Li's responsibility. It could even be said that sending Lu Li to such a competition was a kind of cruelty in itself. Why make things difficult for Lu Li in a losing battle? But, hearing the comfort, Lu Li looked a little better. However, her pair of delicate eyebrows were still entangled, showing that she was still in a bad mood. But what? Wang Lu asked with concern. But I haven't eaten my fill yet. The match is over because the score difference is too big. Lu Li pursed her lips, swallowed a bit, and then looked at the kitchen. It is said that the final dish is Master Sun Buping's chaotic wild. I've seen it in the magazine, and I've been looking forward to it for a long time. It doesn't matter, I'll tell the chef to bring you the rest of the dishes. Wang Lu sighed, and inwardly, he felt relieved. At least little Lu Li didn't have a psychological shadow because of her defeat. Otherwise, he would have committed a great sin. 3 consecutive defeats in the first match of the first day. This result was too horrible to look at, but it was also within expectations. Therefore, the 3 people sent were also open-minded people who could put victory and defeat aside. Supreme Tian Luan had long calculated that today's defeat could be regarded as knowing his destiny. A Wu had an eccentric temperament and didn't care about winning or losing. Lu Li's mind was even more clear. When Wang Lu sent out the list of names, he had already taken it into consideration, so as not to leave a tragic sequela because of one failure. Now that Lu Li was safe and sound, the first fight of the day could be considered as a satisfactory end. Wang Lu smiled and turned to leave. On the other hand, unlike Wang Lu, who had a face full of smiles, the 1 million spectators outside the arena were dumbstruck and speechless, and they were shocked speechless by the 3 successive defeats before their eyes. After a short moment, a wave of clamor broke the silence. People started to discuss animatedly, and there were even people who were extremely angry, shouting and smashing things in the spectator seats. Very quickly, the golden-armored strongman heard the news and rushed over. The emotions of the audience surged, and they fought with the strongman again. The scene was a mess. At the same time, no one knew how many streets in the City of Immortals had a similar situation. Through the broadcast of the signature version, the 3 successive defeats in the first match of the Wanxian League were seen by everyone. Thus, questions, curses, quarrels, were endless. Of course, all of this had long been expected. Not bad, the level of chaos is 20% lower than the highest expected value. It seems that I underestimated their self-control at the beginning. On the Dome of Immortal One area in the City of Immortals, a Xingjing sect elder gently stroked his beard and looked down at the chaos under his feet. He slightly nodded, and his magical power and true yuan, which were combined with his primordial spirit, gently surged and penetrated into every corner of Immortal One area to control the situation. This was, of course, the ability of deity stage. Self-control? I think I underestimated the fighting power of the golden-armored strongmen. Unexpectedly, after entering the red alert state, there would be a stress array in the City of Immortals, which nearly doubled the attributes of all the strongmen. This 20% lower than the expected data was simply smashed by these strongmen with sledgehammers. Standing next to the old Xingjing sect cultivator was a young man. His magical power fluctuation showed that his stage was high-level king pill. He looked like he was in his early 30s, with an unprepossessing appearance. His Xingjing sect robe appeared to be dusty, and his elbows were patched. He looked down and out. However, at this moment, being able to stand on the dome meant that his status was extraordinary. Each area of the City of Immortals was square and fully enclosed. However, there was actually open space between the areas, and only a few privileged people could pass through these areas. In addition to the high-level elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, there were also elite cultivators who performed various tasks for the organizing committee. To be able to be crowned as elite in the City of Immortals, they must be real dragons and phoenixes, and the tasks they performed were also of great importance. However, since it's not higher than the expected value, it's not our turn to make a move. This time, we can easily earn overtime pay. The old cultivator moved his muscles and bones and seemed absent-minded. His eyes occasionally glanced at his feet, which were full of contempt. A group of fools, do they really think that so many people in our Wuxia League can't beat a woman? Stupid. When the slovenly Daoist next to him heard this, he was also surprised. Idiot, do you really think you can win by relying on more people? You've clearly seen the 3 matches, yet you can't see the horror of Tetragon. Do you think we let her win? If the Wuxia League is as useless as you, even if there are 100,000 people, it would be useless. I'm afraid this 3 consecutive defeats is just the beginning. Thinking of this, the slovenly Daoist reached back and summoned his mount, a fat and ugly donkey. I'm not watching anymore, let's go. Everyone has seen the 3 matches today. And I followed up the whole process and observed closely. The conclusion is that Tetragon did not use any tricks. She won in a fair and square manner. There is no doubt about the result. In the deep hall, Wang Lu stood on the podium and stated his opinion in front of the elders from the major sections. This hall was the highest standard conference room arranged by the Heavenly Sage Hall in the City of Immortals. Those who could speak here were at least the most famous and powerful people. As for standing on the podium to preside over the meeting, it was a treatment that only the leaders of several super sects could have. Right now, Wang Lu had the support of Hichu Daoran and Feng Yin Daoist Master, as well as the acquiescence of the leaders of several other sects, so he could stand here as an exception. Because his opinion was really important. Wang Lu's words were concise and to the point, clarifying his point in one sentence. Soon, someone from the audience asked, so, as you said, Tetragon's victory is fair and square. Doesn't that mean she is really omniscient and omnipotent, invincible? On the first day of the 3 matches, Tetragon was not informed before the match. It was not until the players of the Wuxia League entered the field that she knew who was going to compete with her. In other words, it was impossible for her to make a target in advance, but purely to adapt to the situation. Then, she defeated the 3 strongest players of the Wuxia League in the 3 events. The first time was a coincidence, the second time was a coincidence, but the third time could only mean that there was something inevitable. Wang Lu nodded and said, at present, I can only think that Tetragon is indeed omniscient and omnipotent. How can there be an omnipotent person in the world? The person who questioned shook his head vigorously. Even those powerful people who have gone to the end of the immortal path and ascended to the upper realm are not really omnipotent in the true sense. Any of the 3,000 main paths in the world can lead to the highest realm, which is enough for people to study for life. Tetragon is just a Dixian who can't even ascend to the upper realm. How could she be omniscient and omnipotent? Can you explain my question? Wang Lu said, Supreme Huiyuan, I can't explain your question because I don't understand why Tetragon is omniscient and omnipotent. But I think the right attitude to deal with a problem is to first admit the objective facts, and then look for theories that can explain and predict the facts. Instead of using existing theories to erase the facts. What we have seen with our own eyes is that Tetragon is invincible, so I don't think there's any need to dwell on this issue. What you see may not be the truth. Supreme Huiyuan continued to ask, perhaps she learned about our plan in advance through other channels and prepared in advance. Or perhaps she used some secret array in the City of Immortals to get a bonus in the competition. There are many possibilities, so we don't have to find the most uncomfortable one for ourselves. Wang Lu sighed and said, we are now discussing countermeasures, not comforting each other. There are too many hypothetical conditions in Supreme's guess, and the value of acceptance is far less than my guess. Very well, you are talented and always reasonable. Then tell me, since Tetragon is omniscient and omnipotent, why should we compete with her? Just surrender and admit defeat as soon as possible. Wang Lu sternly said, omniscient and omnipotent doesn't mean invincible. We still have a month, so there's no need to rush to admit defeat. After a pause, Wang Lu said, in fact, through today's competition, I already have some ideas. Supreme Huiyuan said, I'm all ears. Wang Lu cupped his hands toward Supreme Huiyuan and said, today's 3 competitions have all been competed in the grand competition. Although Dixian lost at that time, they must have learned from the painful experience afterwards and have new countermeasures. Looking at the present Dixian from the perspective of the past, it's normal for there to be deviations. They are the elites who walked at the forefront in the most glorious era of the immortal path. To put it bluntly, in terms of talent and wisdom, I'm afraid they are better than most of the people here. Supreme Huiyuan was silent and lost in thought. Wang Lu said, so, I plan to arrange 3 new competitions, which have never been held in the grand competition, and we are sure to win. Among them, there is a comprehensive test of theory, a dishwashing competition, and a circus performance. After listening to the 3 events of Wang Lu, the audience was quiet for a while. Wang Lu, your 3 competitions seem to be a bit too childish. Will the other party agree? Wang Lu said, let's try it first, but I think the possibility of them agreeing is very high. She won 3 games in a row today, and her momentum is very high. With her temperament, she would probably consider pushing the boat with the current and go to a higher level. Winning makes us even more speechless. So, even if the events are a bit remote, she would probably agree and then try to beat us in these remote areas. That makes sense. Wang Lu said, moreover, the 3 competitions tomorrow will also verify my guess. Guess? Wang Lu sternly said, actually, from my point of view, I don't want to believe that Tetragon is really omniscient and omnipotent. Not to mention whether she can do it or not, it doesn't make sense in terms of necessity alone. She regards herself as the Emperor of Dixian. Have you ever seen an emperor who is proficient in everything? It's enough to ensure that there are proficient talents in each field. She herself needs to be proficient in imperial power. Tetragon's omniscience and omnipotence seems a bit superfluous. Of course, the 3 competitions today are about arithmetic, poison insect, and food tasting, which can barely be considered as the life of an emperor. So, it's reasonable that she is proficient in them. But if she is equally proficient in the 3 competitions tomorrow, it would seem too superfluous. Supreme Huiyuan said, isn't that what I said? And if she is really so omnipotent, what are you going to do? Wang Lu said with a smile, of course, I will find out the secret of her omniscience and then try to imitate it. As you said, although Tetragon is strong, there have been many cultivators who are stronger than her since ancient times. So, if she can do it, maybe we can do it too. Chapter 719. It's unexpected. It's really unexpected. Holding the freshly made test paper in his hand, Wang Lu, as the examiner, was beaming with joy and constantly praised. He drew on the test paper with a cinnabar pen, writing praises. However, beside him, the faces of several elders who were marking the test paper with him were obviously livid, and their veins were bulging. What's more, they subconsciously burst out in anger and ignited the examination room, causing a group of junior cultivators to be in a hurry to put out the fire. It's a mess, what a scandal. An old examiner shook his head and sighed, feeling sorry. He turned over the thick test paper in his hand again and again, only to see the dense handwriting on the paper. Each question had an extremely detailed argument and solution, the train of thought was clear and organized, and every stroke was filled with the author's deep thoughts. Although it was just a test paper with answers, it was like a delicate work of art. However, after holding the work of art for a long time, the old Taoist finally let out a long sigh and tore it into pieces. Someone around him advised, don't be angry, Immortal Wan Wan. Your eldest disciple, Immortal Jinmu, has answered very well. Such a tricky test paper can finally get 60% of the score, which has far exceeded most of the examinees. It's not a waste of the wisdom of your Heng Shui sect. The old Taoist looked defeated. However, in the end, he lost to that Tetragon. The person who tried to persuade him said with a wry smile, "Tetragon is the emperor of Dixian. His talent is all around and unparalleled. Not to mention your Hang Shui sect, even those arrogant cultivators of the 10,000 arts sect returned in failure. Their score is not as good as Jinmu." The old Taoist raised his head with some excitement. "But the cultivators of our Hang Shui sect have never lost to anyone in the test paper. Whether the opponent is a human or an immortal. This is the foundation of our Hang Shui sect." Alas! The person who tried to persuade him had nothing to say. The people of Hang Shui sect had always been extreme on this issue. 30 years ago, Shueba, the eldest disciple of Hang Shui sect, and Taoist priest Tian Shu of 10,000 arts sect made a bet on the shore of the Sea of Books. In one night, the two of them read half of the books in the Sea of Books, and then each set a question. One asked and one answered. The two of them fought for 3 days and 3 nights. Finally, Taoist Master Shueba won by one question. However, when he returned to the sect, his primordial spirit was exhausted, and he vomited blood and died. Although Taoist priest Tian Shu lost the competition, he was enlightened and broke through the limits of the nascent soul and soul formation stage. In the eyes of most people, the real winner of that competition was undoubtedly Taoist priest Tian Shu of the 10,000 arts sect. However, for the Hang Shui sect, Taoist Master Shueba was a model worthy of great admiration, because he had the Hang Shui spirit. He would never lose to anyone when it came to questions. He was willing to pay any price for it. Now, although Taoist Master Jinmu had defeated the talents of the major sects in the Wanxian League, he was completely defeated by Tetragon. How could the people of Hang Shui sect bear the defeat in the examination? Old Taoist Wan gritted his teeth. This matter is not over. When I go back, I will let all the disciples in the sect do a closed-door training. If we don't thoroughly understand this set of questions and defeat Tetragon, we will never come out. The people next to him were shocked. Taoist Master, you must calm down. This matter must not be reckless. It's incredible that Tetragon can do this set of questions with more than 90% correct rate. And Taoist Master Jinmu has been training for a full 6 months, and he is the best among many contestants. His correct rate is also 60%. During this period, the gap can't be made up by closed-door training alone. Old Taoist Wan's eyes were firm. There is no difficulty in the world that cannot be overcome by hard work. Any difficult problem must bow down to the Sea of Questions tactic. The reason why Jinmu can't defeat Tetragon is that he hasn't done enough questions. When I go back, I will send him to the Sea of Questions boat to travel for 10 years. I don't believe that he can't beat Tetragon. After 10 years, the grand competition would have been over, okay? Old Taoist Wan still insisted, but Tetragon must still be alive. He is Dixian, with a long lifespan, so he won't die so easily. At that time, I will let Jinmu come and take revenge. Very well, whatever you want. For such a strange idea of a strange sect, people wanted to persuade it, but they couldn't. However, from another point of view, to be able to make such an extreme and strange sect helpless. Tetragon's strength had indeed reached an incredible level. Even in such an unorthodox project as the conduct test, she had an overwhelming advantage over the union of 10,000 immortals. This kind of test was personally set, organized, and graded by Taoist Master Wang Lu. As for the test, this strange form of test had gradually become popular in 9 regions in the past 100 years. In the hands of Wang Lu, it had been greatly improved, which could effectively test the examinee's intelligence level and ability to handle affairs. However, in order to cope with the grand competition, Wang Lu increased the difficulty of the test thousands of times, which was close to unimaginable. In order to show fairness, before the start of the grand competition, Wang Lu, through the planning book, handed over the questions and examples of the conduct test to the ancient Earth immortals. However, at the same time, he also handed over a large number of teaching books to the Union of 10,000 immortals for more targeted special training. As for the process of setting the questions and grading the papers, naturally, it would not be faked, because in theory, it was unnecessary. The Wanxian League had the upper hand, so they should not lose. Unfortunately, the facts were in front of them. Even Daoist Master Jinmu of Hang Shui's sect had lost. Who else could win? Perhaps Wang Lu could do it, but the questions were set by him, and he had to grade the papers. How could he be allowed to take the test? Well, everyone, don't be depressed. Yesterday, we lost 3 times in a row, so what's the point of losing the first match today? Just when everyone was in doubt, Wang Lu clapped his hands and said something that was not comforting at all. After that, he left his desk, walked into the arena, and spoke to the crowd as the host. Next, prepare for the next match. Led by the chief mate of the 16-night villa, who is the best at housekeeping service in the Wanxian League, a total of 37 people will participate in a dishwashing competition with Tetragon, the leader of the Dixian League. With that, Wang Lu spread out his arms. Suddenly, there was a clanging sound, and a mountain of various bowls appeared in the middle of the arena. In the blink of an eye, a suffocating stench filled the entire venue. In the cleaning team, several young girls who seemed to be in their prime shook slightly, and their expressions changed. There are a total of 3 million bowls here. As you can see, they have been stained with all kinds of filth, and the stench is unbearable. Your task is to clean these bowls within a limited time. The person who cleans the most bowls wins. Gentle reminder, these bowls are made of different materials, and the pollutants are also different. You need to adapt to the local conditions to clean the filth. In addition, there are a few bowls with hidden filth. If you don't find them and treat them as clean bowls and put them together with other washed bowls, it is likely to cause large-scale pollution, and all previous efforts will be wasted. So, it's time to test your housekeeping skills. Let's wait and see who can clean these bowls most accurately, carefully, and quickly. Wang Lu's hosting speech was concise and to the point, and he flashed away after saying that. A group of maids were left behind, rubbing their hands and looking at the mountain of bowls. As for Tetragon, he looked at Wang Lu's back with great interest. Dishwashing competition? You actually dare to let me, the head of the Dixian, do such a lowly thing? Are you really bold, or have you already seen something? Just as Tetragon was muttering to himself, the chief mate of the 16-night villa had already taken the lead and rushed to the mountain of bowls. In 2 steps, she had put on a full set of equipment, a mask, a scarf, gloves, and a white apron. She waved her hand, completely disregarding the stench and filth, and picked up a porcelain bowl from the mountain of bowls. With a glance, she could clearly see the filth in it. Then, a stream of clear spring water gushed out from her palm, swirled in the bowl, and dissolved the filth in it. With another turn of her hand, the white bowl was placed on a small table. Several female cultivators looked at it with envy and admiration. The bowl just now, as well as the filth in the bowl, were not simple. The bowl was made of white jade lotus porcelain, and the bowl was like a lotus flower, and ordinary oil stains could not be stained. To be able to leave dirt in the bowl, it had to be a special item. According to their visual observation, the black fog glue residue in the bowl was extremely sticky and insoluble in ordinary liquids, making it very difficult to clean up. To exaggerate, without a cultivation base of Shudan or above, there was no way to clean the black fog glue. However, the disciples of the 16-night villa only used a stream of clear spring water to clean it. The clear spring water was obviously not an ordinary product. It should be a special detergent produced by the sect, and its effect was really extraordinary. And only the 16-night villa, which focused on housekeeping services, would have this special product. However, those who were sent to participate in the competition were all outstanding in the field of housekeeping. Dozens of other female disciples showed their magical abilities, picking up the dirty bowls from the mountain of bowls and quickly cleaning them up. Their movements were extremely fast, and in the eyes of ordinary people, they could only see after images. Not long after, a clean mountain of bowls was piled up around these disciples. During this period, Tetragon never made a move. He just watched the efforts of others as a bystander, as if he had no interest in participating at all. The time given by Wang Lu was not long, only half an hour in total. Based on the number of dirty bowls and the difficulty of cleaning them, if most people did not make any mistakes, they could clean thousands of bowls. For example, the elites of the 16-night villa could clean more than 20,000 bowls. Of course, for the mountain of 3 million bowls, it was still a drop in the bucket. So, to take the trouble to prepare so many dirty bowls, did Wang Lu deliberately leave some extra, or, at this moment, Tetragon finally moved. She only made 2 movements. The first movement was to stretch out her right hand and raise it slightly. Thus, the entire mountain of bowls was lifted up by her. The second movement was to separate her left and right hands, and then suddenly struggle. As a result, the entire mountain of bowls buzzed and trembled, and countless fine dirt swarmed out from every corner of the mountain of bowls. They were stripped from the bowls by an invisible force, gathered, and then quickly lifted into the sky. In an instant, there was an extra dark cloud in the sky. But at this time, a stream of fire flew from the horizon, instantly igniting the entire cloud and dyeing the sky blood red. Shrouded in blood, the entire mountain of bowls fell down under the effect of gravity. Bang! There was a muffled sound. The mountain of bowls fell to the ground, shaking the ground slightly. However, this was far less than the shock in the hearts of the people who watched the whole process. What happened just now? While everyone was in turmoil, Tetragon did not wait for anyone. Well, I'm done washing. Can this farce end now? With that, Tetragon turned his eyes to the top of the arena. Wang Lu had been waiting there for a long time. You are indeed the omniscient and omnipotent head of the Dixian. Your Majesty's skill is invincible and eye-opening. But today's competition schedule is tight, so I won't waste any more time. Next, the circus performance, please. Chapter 720. Do you think the people of the Beast Master School will cry? In the Immortal 5 area, in the courtyard that belonged solely to Wang Lu was a little bored as he turned the pen in his hand and asked the secretaries around him. Several of the secretaries were temporarily transferred from the Heavenly Sage Hall and were not familiar with Wang Lu's working style. In the face of this question, they were suddenly tongue-tied and did not know how to answer. Just thinking of the scene that happened not long ago. Probably, someone from the Beast Master School will cry. The chief secretary, Hai Yunfan, sighed. It's really too miserable. In the field where she settled down, she was played like a monkey and lost face in front of millions of people. I'm afraid that the group of cultivators who participated in the competition will not be able to get rid of their inner demons in the next 10 years. I didn't expect Tetragon, who was quite gentle in the first few matches, to suddenly turn hostile. Wang Lu smiled. It's normal. The 3 matches on the first day, everything was fair and above board. On the one hand, she needed to show her absolute crushing strength. On the other hand, she couldn't lose the leniency of the Emperor, at least to contrast with Black, who had previously killed her. So, of course, she deliberately showed mercy. However, in today's 3 matches, the first match can barely be regarded as an intelligence test. From washing the dishes, it was clear that I took the opportunity to flirt with her. It would be strange if she didn't slightly punish me. After Wang Lu explained, the cultivators in the room suddenly understood, but soon some people realized a deeper layer of content, and could not help but widen their eyes, revealing a look of disbelief. Hai Yunfan was still straightforward. So, you have long expected this result? Wang Lu said, it can't be said that I have long expected it. Tetragon is not so easy to guess. However, if you flirt with others, of course, you have to be prepared to be turned hostile. This result can't be said to be unexpected, ha ha ha. In the end, it was intentional. How much hatred do you have against the Beast Master School? Wasn't it when you were a Shudan? In any case, you are now the enlightened King Pill. Why do you need to remember the past so clearly? Wang Lu waved his hand. If I had a grudge against the Beast Taming School, it would have been too easy for me to torment them with my power over the past 6 months. You're right. Hai Yunfan thought for a moment and then understood. According to your plan, there must be a school that touches this bad luck, and Beast Taming School can be considered to be at the right time. That's right, Wang Lu said, the sages said, do not shun one's relatives, do not shun one's virtuous person. I'm just following the saint's words. Hai Yunfan sighed. You are so shameless. You will become a saint sooner or later. After a pause, he asked again, by the way, regarding the secret of Tetragon's omniscience and omnipotence, did you discover anything? Wang Lu said, I vaguely have some ideas in my heart, but today I watched the match for the whole day and did not find any evidence to prove my conjecture. Tetragon probably understood that I was using these tricks to test her, so she hid her cards very well. The only thing that is clear is that under normal circumstances, she would not be so omnipotent as she is now. Hai Yunfan frowned and asked, not under normal circumstances. Then do you think she cheated? Tetragon is proud and arrogant. She would not do that kind of shady business. At most, she resorted to trickery. No, even trickery is not in line with her temperament. However, I can feel that the contents of today's match were disdainful of her from the bottom of her heart. She considers herself an emperor, so of course she disdains mastering lowly skills. But she has mastered them, and her mastery is even better than those professionals. If this isn't cheating, what other honorable reason can there be? At this point, the answer seemed to be on the verge of being revealed, but it seemed to be covered with a layer of veil, making it hard to see clearly. This feeling of being one step away from success was the most depressing and unbearable. Hai Yunfan thought hard at his desk for a long time, but still gave up helplessly. Although there are many guesses, according to the current conditions, there is no way to make further deductions. Wang Lu said, yes, the information is limited, and it is meaningless to just think about it, so, it is time to collect some new information. An hour later, on an isolated island with whistling wind and thick fog, Wang Lu sat on the ground and ended a long story. Then he took a sip of tea to moisten his throat and said, this is the reason why I came all the way to visit you. Regarding Tetragon, I think no one here knows more than you, who are also Dixian. So, can I trouble you to tell me, what is the secret behind Tetragon's omniscience? In front of Wang Lu, a woman with a worried expression sighed helplessly, just to ask this question, you took the risk to come to the broken world to find us? Have you ever thought that if Tetragon finds out that you are here? Wang Lu said, so what if she finds out? She has a grudge against you, but what does that have to do with me? I am just an insignificant third party. As an emperor, Tetragon shouldn't be so petty, right? Xian Mo laughed bitterly, of course she wouldn't make things difficult for you because of our friendship. But, you are the one who took the initiative to find out information that you shouldn't. Forget it, since you are already here, there is no point in trying to persuade you. If you want to hear it, then I will say it. Wang Lu nodded, I am all ears. Actually, it is very simple. Your initial thoughts were not wrong. Xian Mo said softly, no one in this world is omniscient and omnipotent. The Dao ancestors of the Great Desolate Era all have their own specialties and their own Dao. They are not omnipotent. Of course, Xian Mo is not an exception. However, even though there is no omniscient and omnipotent individual in this world, there is an omniscient and omnipotent team. And her ability is to borrow the strength of others for her own use. So, when needed, she is omnipotent. Borrow the strength of others for her own use? Wang Lu frowned slightly and muttered, so that's how it is. This makes sense. Borrowing the strength of others is indeed a trick, but it is also an honorable method. Tetragon considers himself an emperor, and an emperor, using others for his own use is indeed a matter of course. Everything under the heavens belongs to the emperor, and everyone under the command of the emperor is the emperor's servant. Thus, the strength of one's subordinates is one's own strength, so what's the harm in borrowing it? No wonder she dares to stand out and challenge our Wanxian League alone. It turns out that the real battle with us is the entire Dixian camp. This girl is so scheming. After sighing, there was a question, this kind of person, what role did she play in your camp in the past? Her character and ability are so domineering, how did she get along with your boss peacefully? Xian Mo sighed again and said, although Tetragon was a little headstrong and self-opinionated in the past, she was not as ostentatious as she is now. As for her relationship with Boss, now that I think about it, it is indeed a little strange. When Boss was around, she was very low-key, and never had a dispute with Boss. In the past, we all thought it was because of Boss's personality and personal prestige, but now it seems that there may be other reasons. Wang Lu said, "You can just say that she bullies the weak and fears the strong. Tetragon is not such a despicable person. On the battlefield, she has stepped forward many times to fight against the strong enemy, and sometimes even took the initiative to put herself in danger. I sincerely admire her courage." "Oh, so your boss's personal charm is off the charts, so much so that even Tetragon, this kind of egotistical person, would willingly bow down to her?" "Unfortunately, she has reverted to her old ways, and none of you can suppress her. Speaking of which, let me ask another sensitive question." Wang Lu paused to make sure that Xian Mo was listening to him carefully, and then said, "In my observation, although Tetragon is headstrong and self-opinionated, she is broad-minded and has amazing courage. Especially compared with you guys, the contrast is even stronger. I still remember that when you guys just woke up from your sleep, when you saw us, the later generation cultivators, you immediately clamored that we were incompetent and not worthy of being entrusted with the inheritance. You even planned to turn the tables and become the masters of 9 regions again. Then there was the grand competition. However, Tetragon, on the other hand, after realizing the weakness of the later generation, she thought of taking the initiative to provide help and shelter for us. In my opinion, Tetragon is much kinder and gentler than you guys. So, why did such a gentle person yell at you guys as soon as she woke up? She can even tolerate us, a group of strange younger generation cultivators, but she can't tolerate you guys, her comrades and compatriots?" After hearing this question, Xian Mo was silent for a long time. She obviously had the answer in her heart, but it was not convenient for her to say it out loud. "It doesn't matter, you don't have to force yourself to answer. Your current expression has already given me a lot of information." With that, Wang Lu stood up and glanced around the isolated island. Then, she pointed out something and said, "You guys are obviously still being exiled and chased by Tetragon, but it seems that you guys are not united, but fighting separately. I have been talking to you for so long, but I haven't seen a third person. Well, it's getting late, I should go back. I hope that the next time we meet, it will not be in this gloomy and secret place, but in the sunshine." Xian Mo reluctantly squeezed out a smile. "I hope so." Chapter 721. Time flew like an arrow. Unknowingly, it had been half a month since Tetragon appeared on the stage for the first time in the Immortal One area. In the past half a month, this kind of thing happened every day in the City of Immortals. Of course, the most important thing was undoubtedly Tetragon's undefeated feat in the Wuxia League. In the past half a month, the arena in the Immortal One area was full of people every time. The audience that could accommodate millions of people was at least twice as crowded. The grand competition, which was originally distributed in countless venues throughout the city, was now concentrated in one place. The once spectacular arena had become narrow. However, compared with the enthusiasm of people from all walks of life in the City of Immortals, the record of the Wuxia League was really terrible. In the past half a month, they were defeated again and again. During this period, they couldn't even make a comeback. Of course, at this time, people didn't know that according to the agreement between Tetragon and the Wuxia League, as long as the Wuxia League could win even one match, it would be a complete victory. However, the current situation was too embarrassing and ugly. During this period, the Wuxia League had to deal with protests from all sides. In the face of people's angry questioning, they had to find excuses to shirk. At the same time, they had to constantly consult with the association to discuss new public opinion measures. Trifling matters like these left everyone in a terrible state of anxiety. And Wang Lu, who was in the center of the vortex, was the first to bear the brunt. The problems that needed to be solved by him piled up like a mountain every day. However, for the secretaries who worked with Wang Lu, their life in the past half a month was orderly, and the pressure was far less heavy than it seemed to others. Because Wang Lu looked very relaxed. In the past half a month, even if something big happened, it was difficult to see even the slightest bit of worry on his face. It was as if he had a well-thought-out plan, and when he began to deal with the problem, he was also methodically. With such a leader taking the lead, even if the work was busy and tense, it would not be tiring. In this regard, the secretaries were really convinced. Among them, even the ones with the worst backgrounds were geniuses and elites from mid-rank sections. They were the center of attention in their sections. However, at this time, these sect elites had put down their cultivation because of a single order from the organizing committee to deal with all kinds of low-level chores with Wang Lu. In fact, this could easily arouse the frustration and injustice in their hearts. However, after witnessing Wang Lu's working attitude, they had to admit that they were impressed. Wang Lu's way of doing things might not be the most brilliant. There was no lack of talents among the secretaries who were good at handling documents and handling affairs, but his mentality and boldness were hard to be compared to. He is just a king pill cultivator who has been cultivating for no more than 30 years, but he is calmer than most of the perfected cultivators in the Heavenly Sage Hall. In the past half a month, the organizing committee has been under so much pressure that many seniors and elders are worried, but Wang Lu is always as gentle and calm as a spring breeze. In fact, the reason for his calmness was simple. Wang Lu had long given up on this match. At this point, it doesn't matter whether I win or lose the grand competition. This sentence was what Wang Lu said to himself half a month ago. So far, he had only mentioned it to a few people, not even to Hichu Daoran. Because at this time, the grand competition had affected countless people. Although the form had changed dramatically, in most people's view, no matter how the form changed, as long as they won, the Wanxian League could fully accept the tombs of immortals and get the support of Dixian. The immortal cultivation world of 9 regions would enter a new golden age. Not many people could resist such a temptation. People's desire was like an unstoppable torrent, which could only roll forward naturally. During this period, anyone who tried to stop it would be crushed to pieces. Of course, Wang Lu didn't want to be crushed to pieces, so he still did his superficial work in an orderly manner. And in the face of public doubts, such as why he refused to participate in the competition in person for half a month? Why did the previous unstoppable momentum suddenly disappear? Was it because of his personal relationship with Dixian? And in case of a failure, what should he do? Wang Lu's uniform answer was, no comment. In fact, in the past half a month, the focus of Wang Lu's work had long changed. Tetragon. Of course, Tetragon was actually the focus of the entire Wanxian League. However, while the Wanxian League was thinking about how to defeat her, Wang Lu was thinking about how to further understand her. Of course, from another perspective, no matter who won the match, as long as they could defeat Tetragon, the result would be the same. However, what Wang Lu thought was even further than this. The more he knew about her, the more Wang Lu found that she was a wonderful person. There were so many secrets hidden in her that people couldn't help but want to unravel them. For example, the first secret: what was Tetragon doing in the past half a month? In most people's view, she appeared on time every day in the Immortal 1 area, won the competition in succession with unpredictable means, and suppressed the entire Wanxian League. But in Wang Lu's view, Tetragon was clearly absent-minded in the past half a month. Although she did appear on the field, her mind had long drifted outside. It was a pity that her ability to borrow supernatural power was too strong. Even if she was distracted, she was still invincible on the field. In the past half a month, she defeated countless masters in a row. This absent-mindedness was well hidden. If Wang Lu hadn't traveled hand in hand with her and had a certain understanding of each other, it would have been difficult to find the abnormality. And a few practitioners with good eyesight in the Wanxian League might have seen something unusual, but they might not dare to believe their own guesses. On such an occasion, she dared to be distracted? How many people would believe such a thing? Wang Lu would. He was now very curious about what Tetragon was thinking. Secondly, what was the principle behind Tetragon's ability to borrow other people's supernatural power? How could she casually use other people's things? How could there be such an overbearing supernatural power in the world? Even if she was the king of Dixian, and the whole world belonged to the king, there must be a premise. The person whose supernatural power was borrowed must recognize her royal power. And if this was the case, in the past half a month, many of her victories were very thought-provoking, because the supernatural power she borrowed was really strange. Thirdly, Tetragon's attitude towards Xian Mo and the others was a bit unreasonable. As for Xian Mo and her group of exiled opposition members, they were obviously feeling a little guilty. This made people even more curious. What were they feeling guilty about? Did they do something wrong, or did they have an accident? At the same time, more than half a month ago, when Tetragon had just been resuscitation, his overbearing power left a deep impression, and his posture when he killed Gisaurus with his bare hands was really powerful. But after that, Tetragon stopped and never chased after the rebels in her eyes. What was the reason? Was it because he was injured at that time and consumed too much energy? Fourthly, the question that extended from Tetragon's secret was, what was Black doing? As the biggest enemy of the Wanxian League before Tetragon's resuscitation, Black once received the highest level of attention from Wang Lu. He led a team of secretaries headed by Hai Yunfan to conduct a comprehensive analysis and research on Black, and determined this person's ability and threat. But after Tetragon's resuscitation, Black fled with serious injuries and stopped. Although it could also be explained that he was seriously injured by Tetragon and could not act freely. However, Wang Lu always felt that with Black's means, he should not have lost so quickly and so thoroughly. And if he was secretly brewing a comeback, then his existence must not be ignored at this time. Black was likely to become the core of the next change in the situation. The above 4 questions were the focus of Wang Lu's thinking for half a month. Of course, there was no conclusion at present, but Wang Lu had found some clues. In the next half a month, he believed that he should be able to find some answers. No matter how good or bad the world was, life always had to go on, and business always had to be done. For the businessmen in the City of Immortals, this sentence was the best portrayal of today. After the change in the form of the grand competition, the ones who were most affected were actually these businessmen. Although those contestants were the most directly impacted, their daily training basically remained unchanged. Although most of them could not appear on the stage, in the current situation, it was a good thing that they did not appear on the stage. Only the businessmen seemed to have been struck by a bolt from the blue. The organizing committee issued an order to greatly change the format of the grand competition, but how could the businessmen recover their early investment? Of course, the organizing committee would not make any compensation. Of course, there was also a reason for not making any compensation. When businessmen took advantage of the grand competition to make money, the organizing committee did not raise the price of taxes and rents. Now that the situation had changed and the business lost money, naturally, there was no reason to make compensation. Wasn't the risk and benefit of doing business coexisting? After enjoying the benefits before, now it was time to take the risk. Of course, at any time, there would always be a few geniuses among businessmen who could go against the current and make a lot of money when others lost. For example, a large business that had recently risen in less than a few months, once again became the winner who had the last laugh in the astonishment of countless people. Boss Shu, this time, your shop is going to become the #1 shop in the City of Immortals. When the new shop opens, don't forget to invite your brothers for a drink. What are you talking about, Boss Ma? You are a highly respected senior, don't flatter me to death, while the businessmen were toasting each other. Shu Si was suddenly in a trance. He felt that everything in front of him was so unreal. The fat old Ma, who was trying to flatter him, was a famous big shot in the business under the mysterious Sky Mansion. He was born as a mortal, but he had a firm foothold in the immortal cultivation world. Now, with the help of a 12-layer spirit root powder and a steady stream of medicinal pills, he had become a Taoist master of King Pill, which made countless cultivators envious. Accompanying old Ma was Wen Fangbua, a businessman who was once insufferably arrogant in the City of Immortals. He had 2 daughters who were as beautiful as fairies, and each of them had a good marriage. However, now his business was in jeopardy, and even the marriage contract had been returned. He was really dispirited. Fortunately, Old Ma was loyal enough to reach out and pull him up. Now, at the banquet, he had become a guest. And he had become a big shot who was qualified to drink at the same table with many celebrities and rich businessmen. And this was just because he had been acting honestly according to someone's instructions. Dead face, you, who the hell are you? Let me tell you, the worship girl Xingjinri, after unremitting efforts, finally got out of Richelieu. Here is the metaphysics formula, 40050650130. Good luck to everyone. Chapter 722. Humph, you're drunk like this again. Do you really think you can do whatever you want now that you've reached the foundation establishment stage? When Xu Si returned home, he seemed to hear the familiar voice saying unfamiliar words. Suddenly, his heart warmed. However, he soon realized that all this was just the side effect of the famous wine, drunk and dreaming, the real projection of people's innermost desires. However, in fact, Dead Face never said any words of concern to him, not even the concern hidden under the reprimand. He was always as cold as ice. Even if they were master and disciple, there was no trace of master and disciple warmth. However, Xu Si was still grateful to Dead Face. Without Dead Face, what kind of boss Xu was he? He was just a libertine that could be seen everywhere in the streets and alleys. And he had seen the end of these libertines since he was a child. Most of them died without a burial place and their corpses were exposed in the wilderness. However, now he was the leader of several major trading companies in the City of Immortals, a veritable noble. Xu Si was well aware that all of this was a gift from Dead Face. Without him, he might not even be able to operate a small shop, let alone seize several key business opportunities and make huge profits, so that he could rise to the top of the business world and live a luxurious life. In addition, Dead Face also taught him cultivation method, which, combined with the power of elixirs, allowed him to reach the foundation establishment stage in just a few months of cultivation, which made many people praise him for his outstanding talent. Nonsense, how could he have any talent to speak of? However, in the final analysis, he didn't have much affection for Dead Face either. At first, when he was still curled up in the small shop, he was deeply grateful to him. However, as the business grew bigger and bigger, the gratitude in his heart became less and less. Instead, his confusion and panic became deeper and deeper. Why? Dead Face was so good to him? There might be hatred for no reason in the world, but there was no love for no reason. When a person showed kindness to the other party, there would always be a demand. Even if the rich gave alms to beggars, it was also for good reputation and self-satisfaction. Of course, there was nothing wrong with this, but there must be a reason for all good deeds. This point was most deeply felt by him at today's banquet. When the wine was drunk, several wealthy businessmen at the table sighed with emotion at Old Ma's righteousness and kindness. In the past, he had only known Wen Fangbo for a little while, but he had extended a helping hand when Wen Fangbo was at his weakest, pulling him out of the abyss. However, under the table, there were businessmen who were familiar with the situation who privately told Xu Si that Old Ma had indeed saved Wen Fangbo's life, but it was definitely not because of old friendship. Old Ma wanted Wen Fangbo's 2 daughters. Of course, this was a reasonable request. Old Wen's 2 daughters were as beautiful as flowers and jade. Who didn't want them? It was a pity that they had all been betrothed to the disciples of famous sections. Although Old Ma was not afraid, there was no need to find trouble for himself. But now that the engagement was broken, Old Ma's help was like pushing a boat with the current. Does this count as taking advantage of others' difficulties? Perhaps, but it was also a fact that Old Ma had saved people from disaster. In the eyes of the businessmen, the huge family business was obviously more valuable than his 2 daughters. Therefore, although there were some private discussions, they also admitted that Old Ma had done a good deed. He was indeed loyal and kind. When Xu Si heard this, he had mixed feelings. Is this loyalty and kind? Perhaps he was born at the bottom of society, so his values were different from theirs. Even if he was a wastrel who was used to sneaking around and going back on his word, he wouldn't think that it was righteous. However, it also made Xu Si understand a principle. There was no love for no reason in the world. Dead Face gave him everything. What was he after? Lustful like old Ma? If Dead Face was really interested, there was no harm in giving it to him. Unfortunately, Xu Si knew that he really didn't have that condition. Was it just because he had received a gift from Wang Lu? Even if Dead Face was a loyal follower of Wang Lu, he wouldn't do things to this point. If he stood in front of the stage, with his achievements today, it would not be difficult for him to meet Wang Lu. Why did he push everything to him? The more he thought about it, the more worried Xu Si became. Dead Face could give everything, and he certainly had a way to take it all away. As for himself, could he still adapt to the life of losing everything? He was used to living a luxurious life, and he was used to being presentable in front of people. Especially. In the past few days, he had met a lot of rich girls and gradually fell into the land of gentleness. If he suddenly lost all of this. Just as he was thinking about it, a cold snort came to his ears. In an instant, Xu Si regained his sobriety, and the distracting thoughts in his mind disappeared. At the same time, a smile appeared on his face. Dead Face. Before he finished speaking, he was unexpectedly interrupted. Starting tomorrow, we will operate according to the new plan. Xu Si was taken aback. There's a new plan? This change is too fast. With that said, he took a few steps into the room and saw a new booklet on the table. When he looked at it, he was surprised again. This. I don't care about the others, but what's with this one? Increase the investment in Luo Xiao? Didn't you give up on him a long time ago? Why do you suddenly think of him at this time? There's no investment value at all. And even if you're optimistic about him again, it seems too eager for quick success and instant benefits if you change it now. Xu Si kept asking a series of questions, but unfortunately, Dead Face refused to answer even a word more. Sigh. Forget it. Whatever you say, I'll let my men do it tomorrow morning. However, at this moment, Dead Face's voice came again. You go and meet him in person. Xu Si was surprised. Dead Face, what the hell are you doing? Do you need me to go in person for this kind of thing? Luo Xiao is already past his prime. There's no need for me to go in person, right? Well, even if he's past his prime, he's still a disciple of Shizhou Jin. I can't compare with him in terms of status, but it's too sudden to go and meet him. Well, I'll go. Knowing that Dead Face's decision could not be questioned, Xu Si nagged for a while and then shut up. Whatever he asked him to do, he would do it obediently. The previous few key business opportunities were also done under such unimaginable circumstances. After dealing with the sudden attack of Dead Face, Xu Si climbed into bed with a smell of alcohol. Before he fell asleep, his heart was slightly at ease. Although he was assigned a difficult task, it was more reassuring than before, when he was given everything without saying a word. Oh. Cooperate with me? In the residence of the Four Elements sect, Luo Xiao was a bit surprised and looked at the visiting guest with some interest. Xu Si. Although he had just stepped into the world of immortal cultivation, in many people's view, this young man had gradually become a pivotal member of the City of Immortals. Of course, in terms of status, Xu Si was far from being comparable to him. However, for these businessmen, what was important was the investment value, not the identity status. And when it came to the investment value, what was worthy of a personal visit from him, a new star who was past his prime? To be honest, even Xu Si didn't understand this problem. Dead Face asked him to come, but he didn't explain what he wanted to do, which was really confusing. Therefore, he had to adapt to the situation. Yes, cooperation. As Xu Si said that, he racked his brains to think about how to cooperate with this bald man. Born in Stern Flower School, he gradually showed his talent from obscurity and overflowed with talent. Then he was accepted as a successor disciple by Shizhou Jin and had several fights with Wang Lu. Although he was at a disadvantage, he showed excellent strength, and then, after that, there seemed to be nothing worth mentioning. Originally, he was expected to show his talent in the grand competition, but as a result, the format of the competition changed and he lost the opportunity to play. It was said that he was depressed because of this. Wait a minute, if that was the case, Xu Xi's mind flashed and he thought of one thing. I hope to cooperate with you and get you a chance to play again. Oh. Luo Xiao seemed to be interested. Why do you want to do that? Xu Xi said, because you have investment value. No matter what others say, you are, after all, the most outstanding member of your generation, and also a very legendary one. Moreover, you have an advantage that others can't match. Compared with those geniuses who have been selected and cultivated by famous sects since childhood. You relied more on your own hard work to rise to power, and this point is actually more appealing to the general public. Moreover. Upon hearing this, Luo Xiao smiled and said, moreover, the cost of investing in me is relatively low, isn't it? Xu Xi said. Please understand, I am, after all, a businessman, right? No problem. Luo Xiao waved his hand and didn't care about his low cost. However, just when Xu Xi thought it was okay, he heard Luo Xiao say, thank you for your attention to me, but unfortunately, I have no intention of participating in the grand competition. Upon hearing this, Xu Xi was stunned. Huh. Recently, I have something urgent to do and will soon be in seclusion. I'm afraid I can't cooperate with others. So, thank you for coming today, but unfortunately, I can only decline your invitation. With that, Luo Xiao got up to see the guest off, not giving Xu Xi a chance to respond. You mean, he claims that he has something important to do and can't participate in the grand competition? Xu Xi said helplessly, yes, and after saying that, he drove me away, not giving me a chance to play at all. Inside the room, Dead Face was rarely lost in thought. Xu Xi's heart suddenly hung up. Things had already come to this point. Could it be that Dead Face still refused to give up? How attractive was this Luo Xiao that he was worth being so persistent? I say, since he is so uncooperative, we don't have to shamelessly curry favor with him, right? Wouldn't it be strange for outsiders to see it? So, not only do you have to continue to invite him, but you also have to invite him with great fanfare so that everyone in the City of Immortals knows about it. As for the reason, just think of it as buying a horse's bone with 1,000 gold to buy people's heart. You are a rookie in the City of Immortals, so it's reasonable to use this to buy people's heart. Huh? Dead Face, who exactly is that Luo Xiao to you? Aren't you being too kind to him? Little mouse, after this, I will give you freedom. Xu Xi was startled. What did you say? After this, I will go on a long journey. I'm afraid I won't be able to see you again for decades. So, you don't have to worry about me taking everything away from you anymore. Xu Xi was taken aback. What nonsense are you talking about? Everything I have is given by you. If you want to take it away at any time, if I even frown, I will be struck by lightning. My soul will fly away and scatter. Oh, that's nice to hear, but are you really willing to give up the glory and wealth today? Are you willing to give up those gentle girls? Very well, even if I'm a little reluctant, I never want you to go. What should I do without you? How can I manage such a big business with my little ability? Except for a few key decisions, I never told you what to do, and you still did a good job. Now, you just have to be at ease and live a life of wealth without worry. Xu Xi was stunned for a moment. Somehow, he felt more and more frightened. When Dead Face was there, he respected him and feared him. But if Dead Face was gone, the fear in his heart would only be stronger. But what about my cultivation? Oh, you always don't like cultivation. Xu Xi suddenly seemed to be choked. Do you really want to go? After this, you and I will separate. So, do this well. Xu Xi was silent for a long time. Although I don't know what you want to do, since it's your request, I will do it no matter what. Chapter 723. Recently, the city of immortals has become deserted. In the restaurant, a wine guest held a wine pot and gently shook it. His eyes looked out through the window, and the corner of his mouth evoked a playful smile. Across the table, a Taoist in coarse clothes coldly said, "Deserted? There are more and more people in the city of immortals." After a pause, he said, "Not only people, but also evil spirits." "What kind of evil spirits can hide from your eyes?" The wine guest sneered and took another sip of wine. "Even if some evil sects come in, they're probably evil spirits and monsters. These days, I haven't seen them carry out terrorist attacks at all. It's really boring." The Taoist across the table frowned. "You called me here just to complain about these boring things?" "Ha ha ha, of course not. As the supervisor of Xingjing sect, how could I delay your time for boring things? This time, I invited you here to ask something. Of course, it's not for nothing. Today's dishes and wine on the table are on me." The Taoist frowned and looked at the table. There were 3 empty wine pots, all of which were eaten by the wine guest. A plate of peanuts was also eaten by the wine guest, and he didn't taste any of them. At the same time, there was only a pot of rough tea and a half-full teacup in front of him. Did he spend so much effort to call him over just to invite him to drink such a cup of free tea? He was indeed the famous bitch in 9 regions, the record holder of the Wanxian League's lower limit. "Wang Wu, if you have something to say, just say it." However, Wang Lu is the chief planner of the organizing committee, so he has a rich source of information. "What do you want to know?" "Just ask him, why do you have to go far?" The wine guest across the table was Wang Wu. "Supervisor, you think too highly of him. When it comes to intelligence, who can compare with the 9 regions supervisor of Xingjing sect? The famous former number 1 king pill in 9 regions, Taoist Master Kong Zhang." The Taoist in coarse clothes invited by Wang Wu was Kong Zhang of Xingjing sect, an unknown but influential Taoist master of King Pill. The former number 1 king pill of the 9 regions, this title is really ear-piercing. As Kong Zhang spoke, his gaze pierced forward like a sword. However, this seemingly corporeal gaze seemed to sink into a void of chaos, unable to exert any force. Kong Zhang chuckled and withdrew his gaze. This simple exchange had indeed revealed an insurmountable gap in strength. There was indeed an insurmountable gap between the current number 1 king pill of the 9 states and the former number 1 king pill. "What do you want to ask? Speak." Wang Wu put down the wine pot and pondered for a moment. "I want to know, in your opinion, what important things have happened in the city of immortals these days?" Kong Zhang couldn't help but laugh. "What a good question." The city of immortals was so big that there were countless things that happened every day. The competition in Immortal 1 area alone was the focus of attention of tens of thousands of people, which was worth writing about. However, Wang Wu probably didn't call him over to ask about those things that everyone knew. In fact, she had Wang Lu as her disciple, so it was not difficult for her to know any information, but it was difficult to find useful information among the thousands of information. An average person wouldn't be able to sift through the information and organize it well. And this was the irreplaceable place of the 9 regions supervisor of Xingjing sect. After thinking about it, Kong Zhang said, "In my opinion, there are a few things worth mentioning in the city of immortals in the past few days. First, Wang Lu left the city of immortals several times and went deep into the whirlpool of stars to meet with Dixian. The initial speculation is that he met with Tetragon." Before he finished speaking, Wang Wu nodded and confirmed the news. Yes, he went to see Tetragon. It seems that he wanted to use the beauty trick to seduce her, but he failed shamefully. Kong Zhang pondered for a moment and decided to filter out Wang Wu's nonsense. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Wang Lu met with Tetragon. In addition, in the past few days, there are more unclean things in the city of immortals. Wang Wu immediately became interested and asked, "What is it?" Kong Zhang shook his head and said, "At present, I can't find any clues. The other party's skill is quite high, and I'm just intuitively judging it. Since the 9 regions supervisor can't find any clues, could it be someone from the demon sect? No, I remember the stench of the demon sect very clearly. But now, I can only say that these are unclean things, but I can't tell what they are at all. After a pause, Kong Zhang said, I'm not even sure if these unclean things really exist. Well, in the current situation of the City of Immortals, it's not surprising to provoke anyone. 9 regions is vast and boundless. Maybe there are hidden powerful people who came to watch the fun. Kong Zhang nodded and said, that's also an explanation, but I can't feel at ease if I can't figure out their identity. Very well, is there anything else? The third thing is, Xu Si, the owner of Qing Feng Enterprise, has been asking to see Luo Xiao for several days in a row, wanting to cooperate with him, but Luo Xiao closed the door and refused to see him. Wang Wu was stunned and said, what is this? You even care about this kind of folk gossip? I'm familiar with Luo Xiao, but who is Xu Si? A new rising star in the business world. Kong Zhang patiently explained the origin of Xu Si to Wang Wu. A very interesting person. After listening to his story, Wang Wu was also curious and said, how is this interesting? The number of businessmen floating in the sea of business is like the grains of sand in the Ganges River. Every day, there are people who rise, and every day, there are people who jump into the river. This kid's ability to try his luck is good, but is it worth it for you to talk about it alone? For ordinary cultivators, a business that controlled huge resources in the immortal cultivation world might have considerable weight. However, in the eyes of the supervisor of Xingjing sect, even if a businessman was 10 times stronger than Xu Si, he was still just a businessman. Xu Si himself is not worth mentioning. What's really interesting is the person behind him, a blank person. A blank person? Kong Zhang said, I can find out his appearance, his cultivation base, and his every move in the City of Immortals. But before entering the City of Immortals, his record is blank. And in this world, there is no real blank person. Even if it's your sex Wang Lu, at least I know that he was born in Wang family village and has a very wonderful inheritance. Speaking to this, Kong Zhang once again looked at Wang Wu with his sharp eyes. Unfortunately, he still didn't get any response. He continued, but I can't find out the origin of the person behind Xu Si. Wang Wu shook the wine pot and said, with the means of the supervisor, if you really want to know something, there will always be a way. Unfortunately, when I noticed him, he was no longer a target that I could make a move on at will. With the cover of Qing Feng Enterprise, I can't make a move on him at will. I have observed him. Although his origin is unpredictable, he is not an enemy that needs to be dealt with by fair means or foul. I see. So, speaking of which, what do you think is wrong with this guy instructing Xu Si to see Luo Xiao? I don't know. Kong Zhang said bluntly, I can't see the problem, but I can't figure out the reason why he deliberately went to see Luo Xiao. The reason given by Qing Feng Enterprise is to buy a horse's bones with 1,000 gold, but I don't believe it. Wang Wu didn't understand. And then? Even if you can't figure it out, it's not a big deal in the end. Kong Zhang said seriously, things that I can't figure out have the value of taking seriously. Very well, you're really confident. Is there anything else important after that? Kong Zhang thought for a moment and said, the fourth thing is that you called me here. Wang Wu smiled and said, don't worry, I don't like you, so you don't have to worry about your chastity. Kong Zhang said, but there must be a reason. What did you find? Sure enough, I said that if I look for you inexplicably, I would definitely be suspected. Fan Air, that big-breasted brainless girl, wanted me to try. She said that you might be naturally stupid. Wang Wu sighed and said, in short, there is a girl in my family with a particularly keen intuition. She said that something might happen in the City of Immortals recently. I asked a few people, but they all felt puzzled, so I had to ask you. Kong Zhang pondered for a moment and said, you said Fan Air. Is she one of those women who suddenly appeared in the City of Immortals together with Yu Jiao of Song and the others? I just want to ask you, what is their origin? I have checked. Oh, just take it as a woman's secret. Wang Wu said, I guarantee that they are all good girls. Each of them is a pure and kind girl. Kong Zhang couldn't say a word for a long time. The guarantee made by the number one bitch in 9 regions was too convincing. Very well, I can put down the matter of these people first. But, if there is any new situation on your side, remember to contact me in time. At least we can confirm each other. Kong Zhang didn't ask much, but he had already trusted the intuition of Fan Air. Because this was the guarantee of the current number one king pill in 9 regions. Wang Wu thought for a moment and nodded. Okay. Thereupon, Kong Zhang picked up the teacup and drank the last half cup of tea. Finally, I also have a question for you. With your character, you rarely take the initiative to participate in these things. You usually avoid them. Is there any reason why you have to do it this time? Hey, this is a big thing related to the safety of the people in the City of Immortals. Why do I have to do it as a last resort? Wang Wu was somewhat dissatisfied with the other party's attitude. Kong Zhang was a serious person. When he heard this, he honestly replied, because even if you do this kind of private work, no one will give you money. Wang Wu finally had nothing to say. After a long silence, she stood up. Inspector, you still don't know me. After leaving the restaurant, Wang Wu smiled gently, looked up at the sky, and whispered to herself, even if no one gives me money, don't tell me I won't ask for it myself. Wang Lu, that bitch, has so much money in his hand, but he doesn't take the initiative to share it with me. At the same time, on the other side of the City of Immortals, the big boss of Qing Feng Trading Company, who was young but had a net worth of billions, boss Xu Si, who could rival a country, was striding heroically on the road to a hidden residence. Looking at his expression, it was as if he was going to the execution ground. Alas, the ancient sages have a beautiful story of 3 visits to the thatched cottage, but I have visited 10 times in a row in 3 days. Even after people have moved, I still pester them. I'm afraid I will be called a pervert in the future. While talking to himself, Xu Si knocked on the door of a small courtyard and was ready to welcome another round of closed door. This was the new residence that Luo Xiao moved to yesterday. Previously, he was harassed by Xu Si every day in the 4 Elements sect. Last night, he moved at night. Unfortunately, he was still seen by Xu Si's men. To be precise, this behavior was indeed no different from that of a pervert. However, unexpectedly, this time, the door opened. Luo Xiao appeared behind the door with a somewhat helpless and somewhat amused face. You're really persistent. Xu Si resisted the excitement and joy in his heart and cupped his hands. However, before he could speak, he saw Luo Xiao waving his hand, come in and talk. Xu Si quickly followed him. Along the way, he followed Luo Xiao to the inner room. Along the way, he looked around and saw that the courtyard was simple and dusty. It seemed that the owner of this place had no intention of living here for a long time. It was more like a refuge. Thinking of this, Xu Si couldn't help but smile bitterly. Master Luo Xiao, this is really not what I want, but for the sake of dead face, I have no choice. I will definitely compensate you for your mental loss in the future. While thinking, Xu Si followed Luo Xiao into the house. However, as soon as he stepped into the door, he saw a person that shocked him. A person who looked exactly like him. Then, he heard the last sentence of his life. It doesn't take any effort to get here. Chapter 724. Ah, can this grand competition still work? Lose, it's just losing. Is the Wanxian League a *********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************OU ****************************************************************************************************************************************************************** resentment and hostility in the arena of Immortal One area almost turned into a substance, like a dark cloud that shrouded the arena. There was a saying in the world of mortals that the people's condemnation was so powerful that it could affect reality. If it were cultivators whose power of will was thousands of times more than that of mortals, perhaps even true immortals who descended to the world of mortals would tremble under the condemnation of thousands of people. The current union of 10,000 immortals was under such pressure. It had been 20 days since the start of the absurd competition between Tetragon and the Wanxian League. Tetragon miraculously maintained the record of total victory. Correspondingly, the Wanxian League naturally maintained the record of total defeat. Since the establishment of the Wanxian League, there had never been such a shameful and embarrassing record. This grand competition was really the first in the immortal cultivation world in 9 regions. Alas, calm down. After all, the competition hasn't reached the last moment yet. Fortunately, Senior Gem Emperor arrogantly changed the condition to the union of 10,000 immortals winning the first match, which finally left us with a little chance. What's there to be happy about? Even if we win by a fluke, do you have the face to admit that we won? There are tens of thousands of sects and hundreds of millions of cultivators in the Wanxian League, yet they can't even do anything to one person from the other side. I think all the high-level people should commit suicide to apologize. Well, I don't think it's necessary to think that extreme. After all, the other party is Dixian, who cultivated before the age of chaos. Her conditions are unique, which we can't compare with. Although it seems that Tetragon is the only one, she represents the entire Dixian camp, and Dixian can be said to be the representative of the glorious era before the age of chaos. Enough, you can tell this kind of deceptive reason to yourself. Damn it, I donated money and goods to them in the past, I'll just consider it as feeding the dog. Are you done yet? I've been listening to you farting for the past 2 hours. If you're that capable, why don't you go on stage and compete with Tetragon yourself? Didn't she say that anyone was welcome to challenge her? If you look down on the Wanxian League organizing committee, you can do it yourself. What does that have to do with you? Are you a dog of the Wanxian League? You are so loyal to your master, do you think Wang Lu will give you 2 more bones? Damn it, are you asking for a beating? Seeing that chaos was about to break out, 3 golden-armored warriors descended from the sky and suppressed a few cultivators who were rubbing their fists with invisible pressure. However, similar scenes could be seen everywhere in the City of Immortals. Although the golden-armored men were loyal to their duty, their number was limited, and there were always places where they could not stop it. This caused the order in the City of Immortals to become increasingly chaotic. However, compared with the worst expectation, the current situation should be quite good. There was no large-scale, organized riot. Although the management of the organizing committee of the grand competition of the Union of 10,000 Immortals was questioned, it was not challenged. After dispelling the hostility, people still rationally believed that Wang Lu should still have the cards that could turn the tables. Of course, all of this was under the deliberate guidance of the organizing committee. As early as when Tetragon proposed to change the format of the competition, Wang Lu led the organizing committee to design a full set of public relations programs to control public opinion and guide people's hearts, and to ease and stabilize the situation as much as possible. Now it seemed that the effect of public opinion work was good. The most important point was that, although it was difficult for people to accept the successive defeats of the Wanxian League, they could reluctantly accept the successive victories of Tetragon. In short, people had a good impression of Tetragon. This was, of course, the role of the public opinion tool. The cultivators of the Wanxian League had no chance to personally contact Tetragon. To understand her, in addition to witnessing her invincible heroic and domineering appearance on the field, they could only listen to other people. As the most familiar figure in the City of Immortals in the past month, the story of Tetragon had been widely circulated. It was said that she was omnipotent. In ancient times, she was one of the top figures, who once made thousands of immortals bow their heads. It was said that she was kind-hearted, noble, and admirable. It was also said that she was a national beauty. Under the purple atmosphere of the Emperor, her figure and appearance were flawless. These stories were, of course, fictitious. It was true that Tetragon was omnipotent, but the one who really made thousands of immortals bow their heads was someone else. As for being kind-hearted and noble, that was even more of a joke. Although Senior Gem Emperor had the breadth of mind and boldness of an emperor, she was too decisive and ruthless in her actions. She had the appearance of a tyrant, which had nothing to do with benevolence. She also disdained the name of benevolence. As for being a national beauty, it was a matter of opinion. For some people, the appearance of a budding girl was an irresistible temptation, but for more people, it was still an unripe sour fruit. The organizing committee used these fictitious stories to appease people as much as possible. But at the same time, even in the eyes of the organizing committee itself, this was tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. The truth would always be exposed. Tetragon was not a cultivator under the Wuxia League, so she had no obligation to cooperate with their fictitious propaganda. Once the truth was exposed, just thinking about it made people restless. However, the person who personally directed all of this seemed to have no pressure at all during this period of time. As the chief planner of the organizing committee, Wang Lu basically handed over the daily work to the secretarial team headed by Hai Yunfan. However, there was only one thing that he had to do every day, skipping work to fish, and his whereabouts were mysterious. Of course, Wang Lu also had a good reason. He was on a business trip due to an important matter. As for where this business trip went, even the chief secretary, Hai Yunfan, was vague. As for what the important thing was, no one knew. Of course, Wang Lu did not seriously conceal his whereabouts. There were countless capable people in this new city, so even if Wang Lu wanted to hide it, he could not. Therefore, there were still some people who knew his whereabouts. In the whirlpool of stars, in the depths of the group of immortal tombs. However, only a few people knew that Wang Lu went deep into the group of immortal tombs to visit an unexpected person. Tetragon. Of course, people did not expect this candidate. Because Tetragon had to play at least 3 to 4 matches a day in the City of Immortals, and the duration of the matches was getting longer and longer. Out of the 24 hours in a day, at least 16 hours were spent in the arena. And Wang Lu's whereabouts were uncertain, most of them were at the same time. In theory, it was impossible for them to meet each other. In fact, there was, of course, a problem. As Wang Lu initially guessed, although Tetragon was invincible in the arena, she was actually absent-minded. Because the Tetragon in the arena was just her avatar. Tetragon's real body had always been in the whirlpool of stars. On this point, if Wang Lu had not personally gone to the whirlpool of stars and seen Tetragon's real body, even he could not be completely convinced that Tetragon really had the courage to use an avatar to fight against the Wuxia League. However, after meeting her, Wang Lu realized that it was not that Tetragon was bold, but that she had no choice. She had more important things to do than to suppress the Wuxia League in the City of Immortals with her own strength. The whirlpool of stars to kill the rebels. When Wang Lu ventured deep into the whirlpool of stars for the first time, he happened to encounter Tetragon fighting against Jianghu. The girl fought against 3 enemies alone, and the Emperor Purple Chi in her hands was ever-changing and had infinite magical abilities. In the end, she managed to severely injure 3 raging world dragons with the strength of immortal beasts, and forced them to flee in panic. After defeating Jianghu, Tetragon naturally found Wang Lu and questioned his purpose. "I'm here to deepen our understanding and friendship." Of course, this excuse could not fool him. Seeing that Tetragon's eyes flickered and seemed to have a murderous intention, Wang Lu had to turn over a card. "Swan Xian and Xian Mo are your people, right?" After this sentence, Tetragon's face changed slightly. She reached out and stirred the river of stars, causing countless bright stars to shatter and destroy, and then drew out a dead silent area to surround the two of them. Then, she looked at Wang Lu solemnly for a while. "How do you know?" "Xian Mo told you." "She shouldn't have the guts." Wang Lu said, "I don't need anyone to tell me. I can guess it. You used their magical ability in the competition, so of course I know they are your people." Tetragon frowned slightly and said, "You know I can borrow other people's magical ability? But, just based on this? This reason is enough. It's impossible to borrow magical ability without restrictions. Otherwise, you would not have lost to them that year if you directly borrowed the magical ability of the fallen immortals. According to my speculation, the biggest possibility is that the original owner of the magical ability needs to be willing to let you borrow it. The whole world belongs to the king, but the people in the king's land have to be obedient people to pay taxes. If they are traitors, you can't get any benefits from them." Tetragon could not help but sneer and said, "Whimsical. But it's not unreasonable. You guessed it right, my Emperor Purple Chi does have such a restriction. However, Based on this, I'm afraid you can't conclude that Xian Mo and Lu Biechen are my people, right? Wang Lu said, your performance in the competition is too arrogant. Using Xuan Xian's technique to win against Tian Luan, using Yin and Yang division to win against 16 Knights Villa. I'm not blind, of course, I can see it clearly. Ha, you're sharp. Tetragon declined to comment. Then, what did you find? Wang Lu said, since I guessed that those two people are your people, I naturally want to know why you are so ruthless to your own people. Tetragon lightly said, maybe it's because I'm a tyrant? Can we talk about something nutritious? Wang Lu sighed and said, can we respect each other's IQ? Ha 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 ha. Tetragon laughed loudly and looked very happy. Tell me, what else do you know? Wang Lu said, after thinking about it, I think the most likely thing is that there is a traitor among you. You let the two of them use the trick of injuring themselves to gain the confidence of others. Tetragon's smile suddenly disappeared, and his cold eyes swept over like a sharp blade. This is not something that can be joked about. So even you have to deal with it carefully, for fear of making the slightest mistake. You let Xian Mo, Lu Biechen, and perhaps others use the trick of injuring themselves to gain the confidence of others and expel them together with the one you suspect. You constantly put pressure on them, forcing them to work together during this period, and then expose the real traitor. Tetragon nodded. Your guess is somewhat reasonable. Wang Lu smiled slightly and said, of course, if there's a deeper speculation, perhaps you don't even trust Xian Mo and Lu Biechen. Otherwise, you don't need to expose your cards so quickly in the City of Immortals. Although you are used to covering up your true temperament with the attitude of a tyrant, I think you are at least a meticulous person and would not be so careless in doing things. And if it's intentional, then I'm afraid two things can be inferred from this. Then, in the increasingly serious eyes of Tetragon, Wang Lu stretched out two fingers. First, you have doubts about Xian Mo and Lu Biechen, so you blatantly used their magical abilities in the competition, not hesitating to expose their identities. Second, you deliberately did it for others to see, but that person is not me, because it makes no sense to show it to me. In other words, you think there are traitors in the City of Immortals. Hearing this, Tetragon's face finally completely changed. Chapter 725. Who else did you say those words to? Of course not to others at will. What if I'm killed by you? Tetragon chuckled and said, smart. But, for a smart person like you to come to me today and show all your cards, what do you want? Wang Lu said, it can be said that it's curiosity, or it can be said that I'm not willing to be a spectator. Try to stand in my point of view. Even the king of Dixian has to go through a lot of trouble and even beat around the bush to deal with the enemy. If I turn a blind eye to it, wouldn't that be the road to death? Tetragon was silent for a moment and then said, you guessed it right, the opponent is very powerful, even I can't deal with it at will. But because of this, you should act according to your ability and avoid getting yourself involved in the whirlpool. I'm not kidding when I said that I would protect you. Wang Lu said, a monarch does not joke. Of course I know that. But, frankly speaking, I think you can't even protect yourself, so how can you protect us? Moreover, even though our overall cultivation base is not as good as that of our predecessors, we also have irreplaceable advantages, so we don't necessarily need your protection. Don't look disapproving. Do you really think that you're so strong that you can win in the City of Immortals? If I didn't throw the game, you would have already lost. Ha 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 ha. Tetragon laughed again. Wang Lu, your joke is funny. But, if you're serious, I'd like to hear how you throw the game. Wang Lu lightly said, the competition has been going on for more than 20 days, and I've always been a spectator. Isn't that the biggest throw the game? Do you want to say that if you personally make a move, you can beat me? Wang Lu nodded and said, that's right. If I personally make a move, you would have been defeated. Tetragon was silent for a while, but still couldn't help but laugh. Are you serious? Do you really want to win against me, a cultivator with King Pill? If it was your master, it would be a little more serious, but if it's just you. Alright, since you're so confident, then come and try." Before he finished speaking, Wang Lu had already stepped forward and made his move. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi went straight for his face. Zhong Xingming's heaven-splitting divine sword is indeed powerful, but without a cultivation above the soul formation stage, the divine sword is just a formless form. "How dare you use this sword to fight me?" As she spoke, Senior Gem Emperor stretched out a finger and pressed her fingertip against Rouge Tears. Her delicate fingertip bent the immortal sword Rouge Tears slightly. The body of the sword twisted and groaned in pain, as if it was about to break. One sword, one finger, the difference in strength was like the difference between clouds and mud. At this moment, Tetragon did not use his true strength as a Dixian. She restrained her power within the level of King Pill, separated a trace of her ocean-like immortal spirit into a core, and then fought against Wang Lu with the same level of King Pill. There was no level limit in the competition in the City of Immortals. However, at this time, Tetragon strictly suppressed his own strength and did not use the power of Dixian. If they wanted to fight, they would fight according to the rules that were favorable to them. If they won, they would be convinced and have nothing to say. This was not only the generosity of the Emperor, but also a trace of preferential treatment that Tetragon gave to Wang Lu. Wang Lu unceremoniously accepted Tetragon's preferential treatment. After the first sword strike failed, he made another sword strike. Unexpectedly, he held two swords in his hands. This sword strike was very fast and very hidden. The sword light was completely covered in the shadow of Rouge Tears, but its power was not much inferior to that of the immortal sword. However, as if he had foreseen it, Tetragon's other hand just happened to be in front of the sneak attack sword, so that it could not move. Two fingers easily stopped Wang Lu's two thunder-like sword strikes. Wang Lu's face gradually turned red, and his whole body's true yuan boiled like lava as he continued to output power. However, Tetragon looked indifferent and at ease. It was simply a crushing disparity. The strength of Tetragon had far surpassed that of any other Dixian. As a contestant of the grand competition, after a long period of training and strengthening, Wang Lu's strength had more than doubled compared to before the grand competition. He was also at the peak of King Pill, but the peak was different. Now, he had the strength to compete with the general Dixian in King Pill. However, in front of Tetragon, everything seemed to return to the starting point. Trying to compete with me with brute force. Wang Lu, you're too irrational. I'm very disappointed. With that, Tetragon raised his eyes and the virtual King Pill with the immortal spirit energy spun wildly, releasing countless golden threads, which spread out from her body and weaved into a huge net that wrapped her up tightly, like a cocoon. Calm down, I have considerable expectations for you. Tetragon said and sighed slightly, and a trace of disappointment flashed through her eyes. She indeed had high hopes for Wang Lu. Although the strength of this young cultivator was not strong, his resourcefulness was ever-changing, which was often refreshing. Tetragon had long decided that after he unified 9 regions, he must give Wang Lu an important position so that he could display his talent. That would be a more substantial position than the chief planner of the organizing committee. At the same time, she would also try her best to help Wang Lu improve his cultivation base. With the means of Dixian, coupled with Wang Lu's amazing void spirit root, his strength would certainly advance by leaps and bounds. If she used the secret treasure in the depths of the group of immortal tombs, it would only take him 30 years at most, or even a few years at least, to let him enter the threshold of Dixian. However, now it seemed that her expectations for him were too high. Although Wang Lu was talented, he could not avoid some common problems of young people, hot-headed and gambler's mentality. Could it be that he couldn't think of the gap in strength between the two sides? However, he still wishfully chose to use force. Did he really think that he could have a good chance of winning? Although, the sharpness of his sword was indeed beyond her expectation. As Tetragon thought about it, she raised her right hand. On the tip of her jade-like index finger, there was a drop of blood that was particularly eye-catching. Unfortunately, after all, he was still too tender. Tetragon shook his head, put these thoughts out of his mind, and prepared to continue to deal with the matter of Gisaurus. However, at this time, there was a sudden cracking sound behind him. Tetragon's complexion changed dramatically. "Wang Lu, are you crazy?" The giant white cocoon was formed by Tetragon's immortal spirit virtual king pill. It was like an extension of her body and had a very keen sense of touch. Wang Lu was trapped in the cocoon, and his every move was under the control of Tetragon. Therefore, Tetragon immediately discovered what Wang Lu was doing. He blew up the king pill. After more than 30 years of cultivation, the king pill that carried Wang Lu's entire immortal cultivation path exploded in the young man's indifferent smile. The king pill, which was stronger and more indestructible than any metal, was torn apart by the powerful explosive force. At this moment, even the knowledgeable Tetragon couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Wang Lu surprised her again by making an absolutely unexpected choice. He blew up the king pill. Was it necessary? This wasn't a battle to the death. Was it necessary to disregard his own future and even his own life for a mere victory? Even if he used the power of the king pill to escape, and even won this match, was it really a victory? He couldn't even calculate the basic gains and losses. How could she rest assured to hand over the more important responsibility to him? In that instant, Tetragon thought a lot, and at the same time, she did one thing. She dispelled the cocoon so that the power of Wang Lu blowing up the king pill could be released, otherwise, the violent power would be sealed in a small space. Even if Wang Lu could survive the backlash of blowing up the king pill, he would still be torn apart by the violent power. Although Tetragon was disappointed with Wang Lu's performance, she wouldn't sit by and watch him die. However, the moment Tetragon dispelled the cocoon, she suddenly widened her eyes and looked at the cocoon in disbelief. A purple sword energy was stabbing straight at her. It was hard to describe the brilliance of this sword energy with words. Although in essence, the sword energy was just a manifestation of a swordsman's true essence, this sword energy was like a living person, containing a trace of incredible and magical power. And it was under the control of this magical power that the purple sword energy easily bypassed the 3 lines of defense that Tetragon had set up in front of her and instantly stabbed at her. The next moment, Tetragon felt a slight chill on the center of her forehead. The sword energy had already touched her lightly. Of course, the sword energy didn't continue to penetrate deeper. Tetragon's physical body was still at the Dixian level, and it was almost indestructible. But this sword energy had touched a vital point, and it clearly and unmistakably showed one thing. She had lost. Tetragon was silent. She silently looked at the fragments of the cocoon, and Wang Lu's figure slowly appeared. And the purple sword energy curved and returned to his body. After a long time, Tetragon sighed and said, "The king pill is broken, and the nascent soul is out. This is the sword of the nascent soul. You actually chose this time to break through. You actually managed to break through at this time. The king pill was broken, and the nascent soul was out." This was a hurdle that countless cultivators in the world had experienced. Cultivators used the king pill to fuse with the great Tao, and then used their primordial spirit to fuse with the king pill, refining the great Tao and the pill into a living creature. From then on, there would be even more magical powers. This was the path from the king pill to the nascent soul. It was also the path that Tetragon had walked on before. Therefore, Tetragon understood very well that if a nascent soul cultivator took advantage of the moment when the king pill was broken and the vital essence overflowed, triggering a qualitative change, and used a sublimated sword energy, the power of that sword energy could instantly reach the level of a high-grade nascent soul. However, this sword energy basically only existed in theory. After all, in reality, who would fight someone while the king pill was in the process of breaking through to the nascent soul? The king pill to the nascent soul was a major obstacle on the path of cultivation. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the pill and the death of the cultivator. There had already been countless examples of the king pill being broken, but the nascent soul not coming out. Therefore, Tetragon never expected that Wang Lu would hide his trump card here. The sudden sublimation of the nascent soul sword energy was simply a heaven-defying existence in a battle at the king pill level. The many lines of defense that Tetragon had set up in front of him were designed with the King Pill level Wang Lu as the standard to ensure that Wang Lu would not be able to break through even if he was twice as strong. However, Tetragon did not expect that Wang Lu would be able to break through. In the face of the nascent soul sword energy, these lines of defense were vulnerable and were pierced in an instant. There is indeed no chance of winning against you with brute force, so I have to use my brain. Wang Lu smiled and said, "Now, are you willing to admit that you are not so omnipotent?" You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.